I know that look, tired but wired, hoping something will finally help you relax. You're in the right place. I've got 5 quiet stories ready for you, told softly over the sound of rain. Just let your thoughts settle into the rhythm and let the night ease up around you. Story 1. Someone left a copy of my house, key outside. The day I found the key was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were my late days at the clinic, and I'd gotten home around 8 p.m., exhausted from back-to-back patients and already thinking about the leftover pasta in my fridge. The sun had just set, that bruised purple light fading behind the trees, and I almost stepped on it walking up to my front door. A single brass key, sitting on the welcome mat like someone had placed it there deliberately. I picked it up without thinking, assuming a neighbor had dropped it, or maybe the previous owners had left a spare I'd somehow missed during the walkthrough. The house was new to me. I'd closed on it 6 weeks earlier, my first real adult purchase after years of renting apartments that never felt like mine. A small Cape Cod in a quiet subdivision, the kind of place where people waved from their driveways and left their garage doors open. Safe, boring. Exactly what I wanted after the chaos of my divorce. I turned the key over in my hand. It looked new. No scratches, no wear, the brass still bright and unoxidized. And it had that fresh-cut look, those little burrs along the edges that haven't been worn smooth yet. I glanced around the street, half expecting to see a neighbor walking over to claim it, but the sidewalks were empty. Just me and the crickets and the last light draining out of the sky. I should have thrown it away, or taken it to the police station, or asked around the neighborhood, or done literally anything except what I actually did. I put it in the lock. It fit perfectly, slid in smooth, turned without resistance, and the deadbolt clicked open like the key had been made for it, because I realized with a cold little twist in my stomach, it had been. This wasn't a random key someone had dropped. This was a copy of my house key, cut precisely to match my locks, left on my doorstep for me to find. I stood there for a long moment, the door slightly ajar, my mind running through explanations. The previous owners must have had copies made and forgot about one. The realtor had mentioned something about extra keys. A locksmith had made a mistake, cut an extra, and somehow it ended up here. Each explanation felt flimsier than the last, but I clung to them anyway because the alternative, that someone had deliberately copied my key and left it where I'd find it, was too unsettling to consider. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and tried to forget about it. That lasted about 2 days. The second key appeared on Saturday morning, tucked under the edge of my doormat like someone had slid it there while I slept. Same brass finish, same fresh-cut edges, same perfect fit when I tested it against the lock, my hands shaking slightly this time. I'd told myself the first one was a fluke, an accident, something with a mundane explanation I just hadn't figured out yet. But 2 keys, 2 identical copies of my house key appearing 2 days apart. That wasn't an accident, that was a message. I called my ex-husband first, which probably says something unflattering about my mental state. David answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious the way it always was when he saw my name on caller ID. I asked him, point blank, if he'd made copies of my keys before the divorce, if he'd been to my new house, if this was some kind of sick joke. He said no to all of it, said he didn't even know my new address, which was true. I'd deliberately kept it from him, wanting a clean break from the 3 years of passive aggression and slow-building resentment that had defined our marriage. He asked if I was okay, and I heard genuine concern in his voice, which somehow made me feel worse. I told him I was fine and hung up. My next call was to a locksmith. I had all the locks changed that afternoon. Deadbolts, knob locks, even the lock on the side door that led to the garage. The locksmith was an older guy named Pete, who made small talk while he worked, and I almost told him why I was so eager to get new hardware on a house I'd just moved into. But something stopped me. I didn't want to say it out loud. Didn't want to hear how paranoid it would sound. Someone is leaving copies of my key on my porch. Pete finished up around 4 p.m., handed me 3 shiny new keys, and told me to call if I had any problems. I thanked him, paid him in cash, and watched him drive away with something like relief settling over me. New locks, new keys. Whatever game someone had been playing, it was over now. I believed that for exactly 36 hours. Monday morning, I opened my front door to grab the newspaper and found a key on the mat. Brass, fresh cut. I didn't even need to test it to know it would fit my new locks perfectly. I stood in my doorway, staring down at that little piece of metal, and felt something shift in my chest. Fear, yes, but also something else. A horrible, dawning understanding that whoever was doing this wasn't going to stop. They'd watched me change the locks. They'd gotten a copy of the new key within a day and a half, and they'd left it right where I'd find it, like they wanted me to know they could get in whenever they wanted. The subdivision was quiet around me. Sprinklers hissing, birds chirping, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Normal sounds, safe sounds, the soundtrack of suburban life. But none of it felt safe anymore. Someone was watching my house. Someone had access I couldn't control, and they wanted me to know it. I filed a police report that afternoon, sat in a plastic chair at the station, and explained the situation to an officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. 2 keys, then 3, all copies of my locks, appearing on my doorstep. He typed notes into his computer, asked if I had any enemies, any recent conflicts, anyone who might want to frighten me. I mentioned David, but even as I said it, I knew he wasn't capable of this. David was passive-aggressive, not stalker-level obsessive. He'd moved on to a new girlfriend within a month of our separation. He didn't care enough about me to orchestrate something this elaborate. The officer gave me a case number and told me to call if anything else happened. His tone suggested he didn't expect to hear from me again. Another paranoid woman, his expression said, seeing threats where none existed. I thanked him and left feeling more alone than when I'd walked in. I bought security cameras on the way home. 3 of them, one for the front porch, one for the back door, one for the driveway. I spent the evening installing them myself, drilling holes and running cables, my hands steadied by the simple act of doing something. The cameras connected to an app on my phone, and I tested them obsessively, checking the feeds every few minutes to make sure they were recording. Now I'd catch them. Whoever was leaving the keys, I'd have their face on video, and then the police would have to take me seriously. 2 days passed, no new keys. I started to relax, just a fraction, letting myself believe the cameras had been a deterrent. Maybe they'd seen me installing the equipment and decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe they'd gotten whatever thrill they were after and moved on to easier prey. Then I came home from work on Wednesday and found my bedroom window open. Not broken, not forced, just open, the screen removed and leaning neatly against the wall below, like someone had climbed in and hadn't bothered to hide the evidence. I stood in my bedroom doorway, my pulse hammering, and tried to figure out if anything was missing. My jewelry was still in its box. My laptop sat on my desk exactly where I'd left it. The cash I kept in my sock drawer, emergency money, a habit from my apartment days, was untouched. But something was different. I felt it before I saw it. That prickling awareness that a space you know intimately has been altered. And then I noticed the photograph. It was sitting on my pillow. A picture of me, printed on regular paper, the kind you'd get from a home printer. I was standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee, wearing the robe I'd had on that morning. The angle was wrong, too high, looking down at me. And it took me a moment to realize it had been taken through the kitchen window, from outside. While I'd been inside my own house, going about my morning routine, someone had been in my backyard photographing me. I checked the camera footage with shaking hands. The front porch showed nothing. The driveway showed nothing. The back door showed, I had to rewind 3 times to be sure, a figure approaching at 2:47 p.m., dressed in dark clothes, face obscured by a baseball cap, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly where the camera blind spots were. They walked to the window, did something I couldn't see, and then the footage jumped, skipped. When it resumed, they were gone, and the timestamp showed 2:52 p.m., 5 minutes erased. Someone had accessed my camera system and deleted the footage. I called the police again. A different officer this time, a woman who seemed more sympathetic but ultimately just as helpless. She took the photograph as evidence, dusted the window frame for prints, asked the same questions about enemies and conflicts. She suggested I stay with a friend for a few nights, get an alarm system, maybe consider getting a dog. All reasonable advice, all completely inadequate against whatever this was. I didn't stay with a friend. I should have, I know that now. But something stubborn in me refused to be chased out of my own home. I'd bought this house with my own money, earned through years of work, and saved through a marriage that gave me nothing but a settlement check and a profound distrust of intimacy. This was supposed to be my fresh start. I wasn't going to let some faceless stalker take it from me. So I stayed, got the alarm system, the loudest one the company offered, with sensors on every door and window. I started checking the house when I came home, room by room, closet by closet, like a character in a horror movie too stupid to know she should leave. I slept with a knife under my pillow and my phone in my hand, the camera app open on my screen. For a week, nothing happened. The alarm never triggered. The cameras showed empty porches and quiet streets. I started to think maybe it was over, maybe the alarm had been enough, maybe whoever was doing this had finally gotten bored. Then I came home from work and smelled cologne, not my cologne. I didn't wear any. Something masculine, woodsy, the kind of scent that lingered in a room after someone left. It was strongest in the bedroom, concentrated around my closet, and when I opened the closet door, I saw that my clothes had been moved. Not taken, not damaged, just rearranged, shifted on the hangers, organized by color when I always organized by type. Small changes, deliberate changes, the kind of changes that said, I was here, I touched your things, and you didn't even know. The alarm hadn't gone off. The cameras showed nothing. I stood in my closet, surrounded by my own clothes that didn't feel like mine anymore, and something inside me cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked. The thin shell of denial I'd been maintaining since that first key appeared on my doorstep. The belief that this was manageable, that I could handle it, that everything would be fine if I just took the right precautions. It wasn't going to be fine. Someone was getting into my house at will, bypassing every security measure I put in place, and leaving just enough evidence to make sure I knew. They weren't trying to hide, they were showing off, and I still had no idea who they were or what they wanted. I took a week off work, told my supervisor it was a family emergency, which felt true enough. My family was just me now, and I was very much in crisis. I stayed home around the clock, every light on, every door double-checked, waiting for whoever this was to make their move. They didn't come. Not that I could tell, anyway. I used the time to dig, went through every piece of paper from the home purchase, looking for anyone who'd had access to my keys. The realtor, the inspector, the title company, the previous owners. I made a list of names, then researched each one, falling down rabbit holes of social media and public records, and the kind of obsessive Googling that makes you feel like a stalker yourself. Nothing stood out. The realtor was a 60-year-old grandmother with a Facebook full of cat photos. The inspector had retired to Florida 2 months after my closing. The previous owners were a young couple who'd moved to Seattle for work, their Instagram documenting hiking trips and coffee shop visits 3,000 miles away. I expanded my search. The locksmith, Pete, could he have kept a copy of my new keys? I called the company, asked vague questions about their security protocols, hung up without learning anything useful. I thought about my neighbors, those friendly waves from driveways, those open garage doors. Any of them could have watched me come and go, could have noticed when I was home and when I wasn't. The thought made my skin crawl. On the 5th day of my self-imposed lockdown, I found the notebook. It was in my garage, tucked behind a stack of moving boxes I still hadn't unpacked. A cheap, spiral-bound notebook, the kind you'd buy at a dollar store, and I knew immediately it wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. It hadn't been there when I'd checked the garage the night before. I opened it with hands that had gone cold. The first page was a date. October 3rd, 6 weeks ago, the day I'd moved in. Below the date was a single line of handwritten text. She's here. The next page was October 4th, another line. Unpacked the kitchen, left at 7:15 a.m., returned at 6:42 p.m., wore the blue scrubs. October 5th, pizza delivery at 8 p.m., ate alone in front of the TV, went to bed at 11. October 6th, cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes, didn't close the blinds. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring, my heart slamming against my ribs. Every day was documented, every single day since I'd moved in, my routines cataloged in neat, handwritten entries. What I wore, when I left, when I came home. What I ate, who I called, when I turned the lights off. Intimate details I hadn't shared with anyone, recorded by someone who'd been watching close enough to see me cry through my bathroom window. The entries got more detailed as the weeks went on. Notes about my expressions, my moods, whether I seemed happy or sad or tired. Commentary sometimes. Looked beautiful today. Should eat more. Too thin. Talked on the phone for an hour, seemed upset. Want to make her feel better. The last entry was dated yesterday. She's scared now. She knows I'm here. Soon she'll understand. I dropped the notebook like it had burned me. Understand what? What was I supposed to understand? That someone had been watching my every move for 6 weeks, documenting my life like a research project, breaking into my home to leave keys and photographs and this horrible journal. What possible understanding was I supposed to reach from any of this? I called the police again, third time in 2 weeks. A detective came this time, a guy named Morrison, who actually seemed to take me seriously. He bagged the notebook, asked detailed questions, walked through the house looking for points of entry I might have missed. He found one, a basement window with a faulty latch that I'd never noticed because I barely went down there. The lock was intact, but the latch could be popped from outside with a flat knife and enough patience. "They've been coming in through the basement," Morrison said, his voice grim. "Probably since before you changed the locks. Maybe since before you moved in." The thought made me physically ill. While I'd been sleeping, eating, crying in my bathroom, someone had been slipping in and out of my basement, walking through my house, touching my things, watching me from shadows I didn't know existed. Morrison suggested I leave. Strongly suggested, the way cops do when they can't actually make you do anything but really think you should. He gave me his card, told me to call if anything else happened, said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. I nodded along and didn't tell him that patrols wouldn't help, that cameras and alarms hadn't helped, that whoever was doing this was too smart and too patient to be caught by a squad car rolling past every few hours. I should have left. I know that. Any rational person would have packed a bag and gone to a hotel, a friend's house, anywhere but here. But rationality had left me somewhere around the time I found a photograph of myself on my own pillow. What I felt now was something different. Anger, maybe. Defiance. A stubborn refusal to let this person win without at least seeing their face. I decided to set a trap. The basement window was the weak point. Morrison had said so himself. So that night, after he left, I rigged it. Fishing line tied to the latch, connected to a set of bells I'd bought at a craft store. Low-tech, almost embarrassingly simple, but it would make noise if anyone tried to open it. I also moved my sleeping setup to the living room, positioned so I could see the basement door. I had my phone, my knife, and a baseball bat I'd bought at a sporting goods store that afternoon. I turned off all the lights and waited. The house settled around me, creaking and groaning the way old houses do. Outside, wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked twice and went quiet. I lay on the couch with my eyes open, watching the darkness, my ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. Hours passed. My eyes burned from not blinking. My grip on the baseball bat made my fingers ache. And then, around 3 a.m., I heard the bells. The sound was soft, almost gentle, a delicate tinkling that could have been mistaken for wind chimes if I hadn't known exactly what it was. Someone was opening the basement window. I sat up on the couch, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The baseball bat was slick in my grip. My phone was in my other hand, already dialing 911, but I didn't hit send yet. I needed to be sure. Needed to know this wasn't a raccoon or a stray cat or my own paranoia finally snapping loose from reality. The bells stopped. Silence stretched out, thick and heavy, and then I heard the basement door creak. It was a distinctive sound. I'd heard it 100 times, every time I went down to check the breaker box or grab something from storage. Old hinges, slightly warped frame, a groan of wood against wood that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. The basement door was opening. Someone was coming up. I pressed send on the phone and whispered my address to the dispatcher, told her someone was breaking in, that I needed help right now. She said officers were on the way, told me to stay on the line, to get somewhere safe. I barely heard her. My eyes were locked on the hallway that led to the basement door, waiting for a shadow to emerge from the darkness. Footsteps, slow and unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. Climbing the stairs, one at a time, each step a deliberate announcement. They weren't trying to be quiet. They wanted me to hear them coming. I stood up. Some part of me screamed to run, to go out the front door and keep going until I hit the street, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I was frozen in place, bat raised, phone pressed to my ear with a dispatcher's voice buzzing uselessly in the background. A figure appeared in the hallway. I couldn't see their face. The darkness was too thick, and they were backlit by the faint glow of a streetlight coming through the basement's ground-level window. But I could see the shape of them, tall, broad-shouldered, standing perfectly still at the end of the hall. "I knew you'd wait for me," they said. A man's voice, calm, conversational, like we were old friends catching up. Something about it was familiar, but I couldn't place it through the terror flooding my system. "The police are coming," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "They'll be here any minute." "I know." He took a step forward. "That's okay. We have a little time." Another step. I could see more of him now. Dark jacket, jeans, work boots. His hands were empty, hanging loose at his sides. No weapon that I could see, but that didn't make me feel safer. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want?" He laughed softly, like I'd said something endearing. "You really don't remember me, do you? I'm hurt, Megan. After everything." The use of my name sent ice through my veins. He stepped forward again, and this time he moved into the light from the kitchen window, and I saw his face. I did know him. It took a moment to place. He looked different than I remembered. Thinner, his hair longer, a beard covering the lower half of his face. But the eyes were the same. That flat, watchful stare that had made me uncomfortable, even when I couldn't articulate why. "Greg," I whispered. "Greg Hollister, a patient from the clinic from over a year ago. He'd come in for physical therapy after a car accident. Minor injuries, 6 weeks of treatment, nothing remarkable. I'd been one of 3 therapists who'd worked with him. I barely remembered our sessions, just routine exercises and small talk, the kind of forgettable interactions that made up most of my workdays. But he remembered me. He'd remembered me for over a year. "There she is," he said, smiling. "Knew you'd figure it out eventually. You were always smart. That's what I loved about you." "Greg, you need to leave." I tightened my grip on the bat. "Right now, the police are almost here." "I'm not going to hurt you, Megan." He sounded almost wounded. "I'd never hurt you. I just needed you to understand. All those weeks, watching, waiting, I needed you to feel how much I care, how much attention I pay. Nobody's ever going to love you like I do." He took another step, close enough now that I could smell him. That woodsy cologne, the same scent I'd noticed in my bedroom. He'd been wearing it every time he came into my house, into my closet, touching my things. "Stay back," I said, raising the bat higher. "Megan." He reached for me, and I swung. The bat connected with his forearm with a crack that might have been bone. He screamed, stumbled backward, and I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran. Through the kitchen, out the side door, across the lawn in bare feet. The grass was wet with dew and freezing cold, but I didn't slow down. I could hear him behind me, cursing, crashing through the door I'd left open, and then sirens. Blue and red lights flashing at the end of the street, getting closer. I ran toward them, waving my arms, screaming for help. A patrol car screeched to a stop and an officer jumped out, and I pointed back at my house, words tumbling out faster than I could organize them. Break in, stalker. He's still there. His name is Greg Hollister. Please help. They found him in my backyard, cradling his arm, making no attempt to run. He was still smiling when they handcuffed him. Looked right at me while they led him to the car, his eyes never leaving mine, and said, "I'll wait for you, Megan. However long it takes." The officer pushed his head down into the back seat, and the door slammed shut, and he was gone. I stood on my lawn in my pajamas, shaking so hard I could barely stay upright, and watched the patrol car pull away. My house loomed behind me, windows dark, the side door still hanging open. It didn't feel like my house anymore. Didn't feel like the fresh start I'd been so desperate for. It felt like a crime scene, like a trap I'd walked into the moment I signed the closing papers. One of the officers wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and asked if there was someone I could call. I gave her Caitlin's number without really thinking about it. Caitlin, my friend from work, the person who'd been telling me for weeks that I seemed stressed and should take some time off. I hadn't told her the truth. Hadn't told anyone the full truth until tonight. I was going to have to start. The investigation revealed more than I ever wanted to know. Greg Hollister had been watching me since his last physical therapy appointment, 14 months before I bought the house. He'd followed me home from the clinic one evening, learned where I lived, started documenting my routines. When I'd moved after the divorce, he'd followed, watched the closing from his car parked down the street, noted which moving company I used, what furniture I brought, which room I set up as my bedroom. The police found his apartment 3 days after the arrest. I wasn't there, didn't want to be, couldn't have handled it. But Detective Morrison told me what they discovered. An entire wall covered with photographs of me. Hundreds of them, spanning over a year, organized chronologically like some kind of demented art project. Pictures of me at the grocery store, at the clinic, walking to my car, standing in my kitchen. Pictures taken through windows, from across parking lots, from angles that suggested he'd been hiding in bushes and behind fences. A shrine, Morrison called it, a goddamn shrine. They also found 17 copies of my house key. He'd been making them compulsively, Morrison said, like a ritual. He'd make a copy, leave it for me to find, then make another. The locksmith visits didn't matter. Greg had connections at a hardware store in the next town over, and he'd gotten impressions of my new keys within hours of the locks being changed. The alarm system, the cameras, all of it was useless against someone who'd spent over a year learning my patterns, my blind spots, the rhythms of my life. He was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and criminal harassment. The prosecutor told me they had a strong case, that he'd likely get significant prison time, that I should feel safe now. I nodded along and didn't tell her that I hadn't felt safe since I'd found that first key on my doorstep, that I wasn't sure I'd ever feel safe again. The trial took 8 months. I had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom while Greg watched me from the defense table with that same calm, patient expression. His lawyer tried to paint him as mentally ill rather than malicious, argued that he needed treatment rather than punishment. Maybe that was true. Maybe somewhere inside Greg Hollister was a broken person who genuinely believed what he was doing was love. But I sat on that witness stand and described finding the notebook, the photograph on my pillow, the way he'd touched my clothes while I slept in the next room, and I didn't care about his mental health. I just wanted him locked away where he could never reach me again. The jury convicted on all counts. The judge gave him 12 years, with the possibility of parole after 8. 8 years. That's how long I had before he might be free again. before he might start looking for me, before "I'll wait for you" could become something more than words. I sold the house, couldn't stay there, not after everything. The basement window, the bedroom closet, the hallway where he'd stood in the dark, every corner held a memory I couldn't scrub clean. I took a loss on the sale, didn't even try to negotiate, just signed the papers and walked away from my fresh start like it had never happened. I moved across the state, new city, new apartment, new job at a different clinic. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, told only a handful of people where I was going. My mother, my brother, Caitlin, and Detective Morrison, in case anything came up with the case. Everyone else got a vague story about needing a change, wanting to explore new opportunities, the kind of explanation people accept without pushing too hard. It's been 2 years now. 2 years of checking locks obsessively, of scanning crowds for familiar faces, of waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding because I thought I heard bells. The nightmares have faded mostly. I can walk to my car without looking over my shoulder every few seconds. I've started dating again, carefully, slowly, always meeting in public places and never giving out my address until I've known someone for months. But I still think about him. Not every day anymore, but often enough. I think about the wall of photographs, the years of watching, the way he said my name like we were lovers instead of strangers. I think about how I could have passed him on the street a dozen times during those 14 months and never known he was there. How many other people walk through life being watched, documented, obsessed over, without ever realizing it? I got a letter 6 months ago, forwarded through 3 addresses before it reached me, which meant he'd been trying to find me, had been sending letters to my old locations, hoping one would stick. The envelope was plain, the handwriting neat and careful. I recognized it immediately, the same handwriting from the notebook, from those daily entries documenting my life. I didn't open it, gave it straight to the police, filed another report, added it to the pile of evidence for his eventual parole hearing. But I know what it said. Not the specific words, but the sentiment. He was thinking about me, counting the days, waiting like he promised he would. 6 more years until he's eligible for parole. 6 years of letters I don't read and restraining orders that only matter if someone's willing to follow them. 6 years of looking over my shoulder, of double-checking locks, of sleeping with my phone on my nightstand and pepper spray in my purse. I used to love coming home. That feeling of stepping through your own door, into your own space, leaving the world behind. My house was supposed to be my sanctuary, my proof that I'd survived the divorce and come out stronger on the other side. Now I know better. Locks can be copied. Alarms can be bypassed. Cameras can be fooled. Home isn't safe just because you want it to be. Safety is an illusion we tell ourselves because the alternative, that anyone could be watching at any moment, that walls and doors mean nothing to someone determined enough, is too terrifying to live with. So I do what I can. I stay alert. I vary my routines. I keep people I trust informed about where I am and where I'm going. And every time I come home, every time I unlock my door and step inside, I check. The windows, the closets, the basement, if there is one. I check because I know now that some people are patient. Some people will wait for years. Some people will leave a key on your doorstep just to let you know they can get in whenever they want. I found a key on my doormat last week. Just a random key, tarnished and old, probably dropped by the previous tenant or a delivery driver. It didn't fit my lock. I checked, hands shaking, breath tight, and it wasn't even close. Wrong brand, wrong cut, wrong everything. Just a piece of lost metal that meant nothing. I threw it away, walked inside, locked the door behind me, and then I stood in my hallway for 10 minutes, listening, waiting, making sure I was really alone. Some habits never go away. Story 2. My phone tracked a walk I never took. I only noticed because I was bored in a waiting room. Dentist appointment, running 20 minutes late. Nothing to do but scroll through my phone and pretend I wasn't anxious about the cleaning I'd been putting off for 2 years. I opened my health app out of habit, one of those default things that comes with the phone, tracks your steps and sleep and all that data you never actually look at. I'd been meaning to start running again, kept telling myself I'd get back in shape, and checking the app felt like a step toward accountability even if I never followed through. That's when I saw it. Tuesday, 3:47 a.m., 2.8 miles walked. I stared at the screen, trying to make it make sense. Tuesday night I'd been home. I'd worked a double at the restaurant, gotten back around midnight, collapsed into bed, and slept until my alarm went off at 9. I hadn't walked anywhere. I definitely hadn't walked nearly 3 miles in the middle of the night. I tapped on the entry, expecting to find some kind of glitch. Maybe the GPS had malfunctioned, or the app had recorded someone else's data by mistake. But the details were specific. A map showed the route, starting from my apartment building, heading east on Caldwell Street, looping through Riverside Park, then back home. The timeline broke it down, minute by minute. Departed 3:47 a.m., arrived 4:31 a.m. Average pace, 15 minutes per mile, 44 minutes of walking, documented in precise detail on a night I'd been unconscious in my bed. Tyler, we're ready for you. I looked up at the hygienist and nodded, sliding my phone into my pocket. The appointment took 45 minutes, scraping and polishing and the usual lecture about flossing, and the whole time my mind kept circling back to that map. That route through the park, the timestamp that said I'd left my apartment at 3:47 in the morning and walked for almost an hour. There had to be an explanation. Phones glitch, apps malfunction. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking, although I'd never done that before in my life, not even as a kid. Maybe the GPS had picked up someone else's signal, confused my phone with another device. Technology was weird. Things happened. I checked the app again in my car after the appointment. The walk was still there, still showing the same route, the same timestamps. I zoomed in on the map, tracing the path with my finger. My apartment to Caldwell, Caldwell to the park entrance, a loop around the pond, back out the east gate, home. I knew that route. I'd jogged it a few times back when I was still pretending to exercise regularly. Whoever, whatever, had recorded this walk knew the park well enough to take the scenic path rather than cutting straight through. I drove home feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't quite name. Not scared, exactly. More like that feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget why you're there, that sense of something being slightly off without knowing what. I parked in my usual spot, climbed the stairs to my third-floor unit, and stood in my doorway for a moment before going in. Everything looked normal. Dishes in the sink from dinner 2 nights ago, laundry basket overflowing in the corner, the indent in my couch cushions from where I always sat. Nothing moved, nothing disturbed, no signs that anyone had been there while I was out. I checked my phone again, scrolled back through the health data, looking at previous days. Wednesday showed 847 steps, about right for a day I'd mostly spent on the couch. Monday showed 4,200. I'd walked to the corner store and back a few times. Sunday, Saturday, Friday, all reasonable numbers that matched my memory of what I'd done. But then I got to the previous Tuesday, 3:12 a.m., 1.4 miles walked. My stomach dropped. I kept scrolling. The Tuesday before that, 2.1 miles at 2:58 a.m. The one before that, 1.8 miles at 3:23 a.m. Every Tuesday for the past month, my phone had recorded a late-night walk I had no memory of taking. The routes varied slightly, sometimes the park, sometimes just around the neighborhood. But they all started between 2:30 and 4 a.m., and they all ended back at my apartment. I sat down on my couch, phone in hand, and tried to think. 4 weeks of phantom walks, all on the same night, all while I was supposedly asleep. Either I'd developed a very specific sleepwalking habit that only manifested on Tuesdays, or something else was going on, something I didn't have an explanation for. I thought about the layout of my apartment: front door, deadbolt, chain lock. I always engaged all 3 before bed. Had since I'd moved in, a habit drilled into me by a mother who watched too many true crime shows. The windows were all locked too. 3rd floor, no fire escape, no balcony, There was no way someone could get in without breaking something, and nothing was broken, which meant either I was walking in my sleep or what? My phone was lying. Someone had hacked my health app to make me think I was taking midnight strolls. That didn't make any sense. There was no reason, no motive, no point to something like that. I set the phone on the coffee table and stared at it like it might explain itself. The screen dimmed, then went dark. Outside, the sun was setting, painting my walls orange through the blinds. It was Thursday, 4 days until the next Tuesday. I decided I was going to stay awake and find out what the hell was happening. The next 4 days crawled by. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched TV, all the normal rhythms of my life. But underneath it all was this constant hum of anticipation. Tuesday was coming. Tuesday would give me answers, one way or another. I did some research in the meantime, Googled sleepwalking, and fell down a rabbit hole of medical articles and forum posts. Learned that it was more common in adults than I'd thought, that stress and sleep deprivation could trigger it, that some people did elaborate things while unconscious, cooked meals, drove cars, held conversations they didn't remember. The idea that I might be one of those people was unsettling, but it was also the most rational explanation. Better to be a sleepwalker than whatever the alternative was. I also learned that sleepwalkers could be filmed. One article suggested setting up a camera to catch yourself in the act, to confirm the diagnosis and identify triggers. That seemed smart, practical. I dug out an old laptop with a webcam, positioned it on my dresser facing the bed, and tested the recording software until I was confident it would capture several hours of footage. Monday night, I barely slept, too wired, too aware of the camera watching me, too conscious of every small sound in the apartment. I finally drifted off around 4 a.m. and woke up groggy at noon, having missed my morning shift at work. My manager was pissed. I apologized, blamed a stomach bug, and spent the rest of the day in a fog of exhaustion and caffeine. Tuesday arrived. I worked the evening shift, got home around 11, and prepared for my all-nighter. Energy drinks in the fridge, laptop charged and recording, lights on in every room because somehow that felt safer. I settled onto the couch with my phone in my hand and a movie playing on the TV, determined to stay conscious until dawn. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. I was tired, bone deep, eyelids drooping tired. But I forced myself to stay awake, paced the apartment when sitting got too comfortable, splashed cold water on my face, checked the health app obsessively, watching the step counter stay at 0. At 2:47 a.m., I was standing in my kitchen drinking my third energy drink when my phone buzzed. Not a call or a text, just a single vibration, the kind it makes when an app updates in the background. I looked at the screen and felt something cold slide down my spine. The health app was open, and it was tracking a walk in progress. I stared at the screen, not comprehending. The map showed a little blue dot moving east on Caldwell Street, heading toward the park. Distance covered, 0.3 miles. Time elapsed, 4 minutes. The dot kept moving as I watched, sliding smoothly along the route I'd seen in all those previous entries. But I was standing in my kitchen. I was right here, wide awake, phone in my hand. I checked my surroundings like I might suddenly discover I'd been sleepwalking after all, that I was actually standing in the middle of Caldwell Street, and my apartment had been the dream. But no, there was my sink, my dishes, the humming refrigerator, the energy drink sweating in my grip. I was home, I was conscious, and my phone was tracking a walk I wasn't taking. The dot on the map reached the park entrance and turned north, following the path around the pond. I watched it move in real time, smooth and steady, the step counter climbing with each passing second. 847 steps, 912, 1034. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door. The night was cold, that biting late autumn chill that cuts right through a hoodie. I sprinted down the stairs, out of the building, and turned east toward the park. Caldwell Street was empty. No cars, no pedestrians, just streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement. I ran toward the park entrance, checking my phone as I went. The blue dot was still moving, circling the pond, maybe half a mile ahead of me. I reached the park in under 5 minutes, lungs burning, and stopped at the entrance to catch my breath. The path stretched out ahead of me, dimly lit by solar lamps spaced every 50 feet. I could see maybe 100 yards before the darkness swallowed everything. The map on my phone showed the dot rounding the far side of the pond, heading back toward the exit I was standing at. Coming toward me, I waited, watched the dot approach on the screen, watched it get closer and closer to my position. The step counter kept climbing. 2,100, 2,200, 2,300. And according to the GPS, whatever was being tracked should be visible any second now. The dot reached me, overlapped with my location on the map, and the path in front of me was completely empty. I spun around, looking in every direction, searching for someone, anyone, anything that could explain what my phone was showing me. There was nothing. Just trees and benches and the dark surface of the pond reflecting the lamplight. No joggers, no dog walkers, no late-night wanderers. I was alone. On my phone, the dot kept moving, past my location and continued west, heading back toward my apartment. I stood frozen at the park entrance, watching it go, and something occurred to me that made my blood run cold. If this was being tracked on my phone, then my phone thought it was me. The GPS, the step counter, all of it. The phone believed its owner was taking this walk, right now, the same way it had believed it every Tuesday for the past month. But I wasn't taking this walk, which meant either the phone was malfunctioning in a very specific and impossible way, or something was out there carrying a piece of me, something the phone recognized as Tyler, something that walked my routes at my pace every Tuesday night while I slept. I looked down at myself, checked my hands, my arms, my body, as if I might find something missing. Everything was there. Everything was normal. But the dot on the map was almost home now. And I was still standing in the park, half a mile away, wondering what the hell was going to be waiting when I got back to my apartment. I ran. Faster than I'd run to the park. Faster than I'd run in years, my lungs screaming and my legs burning as I tore down Caldwell Street toward home. The cold air knifed into my chest with every breath. My phone was clutched in my hand, the screen still showing that blue dot, now stationary, right on top of my apartment building. It had gotten there before me, whatever it was. I reached my building and stopped at the entrance, doubled over and gasping. The lobby was empty, the elevator waiting with its doors open like it had been expecting me. I ignored it and took the stairs, too wired to stand still in a metal box, and climbed all 3 flights in a breathless rush. My apartment door was closed, locked just like I'd left it. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no sounds of anyone inside. I checked my phone. The blue dot was still there, overlapping with my location. The walk officially complete according to the app. Arrived 3:34 a.m. Total distance, 2.7 miles. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Lights on, TV still playing, energy drink cans on the kitchen counter. The laptop sat on the dresser, red recording light glowing steady. Nothing disturbed. Nothing out of place, just my empty apartment, waiting for me like it always did. I checked every room anyway, closets, bathroom, under the bed, all the places a person could hide. Nothing. I was alone. If something had come back here before me, it wasn't here now. The laptop. The thought hit me like cold water. The laptop had been recording the whole time. I crossed to the dresser with shaking hands and stopped the recording. The file was massive, nearly 6 hours of footage. I scrubbed forward to around 2:45 a.m., right before the walk had started on my phone. The video showed my bed, empty and neatly made because I hadn't used it. Me pacing past the frame occasionally. The bedroom door, half open, leading to the dark hallway. At 2:47, the exact timestamp when the walk began, nothing happened. The frame stayed empty. No one entered, no one left. I watched myself walk past toward the kitchen, energy drink in hand, very much awake and present. But something was different. I almost missed it on the first viewing, had to scrub back and watch again to catch it. The hallway behind the bedroom door. In the darkness, just at the edge of visibility, something moved, not entering the room, not doing anything obvious, just shifting. A shadow that was slightly darker than the other shadows, there for maybe 2 seconds before it was gone. I played it back 5 times. Each time, I saw it. A shape in the hallway, moving while I stood in the kitchen with my back turned. Gone before I could have noticed, even if I'd been looking. Something had been in my apartment. Something I hadn't seen. Something that had left right around the time my phone started tracking that phantom walk. I sat on the edge of my bed, laptop in front of me, and tried to think through the implications. If that shadow was real, if it wasn't just compression artifacts or my desperate brain inventing patterns, then something had been inside my home. Something that left at 2:47 a.m., walked to the park and back, and returned at 3:34. And my phone had tracked its movements like it was tracking me. But how? The health app used a combination of GPS and motion sensors built into the phone itself. It couldn't track something unless that something was carrying the phone. Unless it was connected to the phone somehow. Unless... I looked at my phone, looked at it really carefully for the first time, turning it over in my hands, examining every edge and seam. It was the same phone I'd had for 2 years, same case, same crack in the corner of the screen from when I dropped it last summer. Nothing unusual. But then I thought about all the things a phone tracks that you don't think about. Location, obviously, but also movement patterns, sleep schedules, heart rate if you wore a connected watch, screen time, app usage, browsing history. These devices mapped our lives in granular detail, built profiles of who we were based on millions of data points. What if something had learned me, learned my patterns, my routes, my schedule? What if it had used that data to become something that my phone couldn't distinguish from the real thing? That sounded insane. I knew it sounded insane. But I just watched a shadow move through my apartment while a phone tracked a walk I wasn't taking, and insane didn't seem like a disqualifying factor anymore. I needed help. Someone objective, someone technical, someone who could look at this footage and this data and tell me I was either losing my mind or dealing with something real. I thought about calling my brother. He worked in IT, knew more about phones and apps than I ever would. But it was 4 a.m. and I didn't know how to explain any of this without sounding unhinged. Instead, I did something probably stupid. I opened the health app and started scrolling through every piece of data it had collected. Steps, distances, routes, but also sleep patterns, heart rate estimates, even audio levels from the microphone. I'd never really looked at this stuff before, just glanced at the step count occasionally and moved on. Now I combed through it like evidence. The heart rate data stopped me cold. Every Tuesday night between roughly 3 and 4 a.m., the app recorded elevated heart rate activity. Not the slow, steady rhythm of sleep, but something higher, the 90 to 100 BPM range you'd expect from moderate exercise, from walking. But I'd been asleep, or at least I thought I'd been asleep, until tonight when I'd proven I was awake, and the walk happened anyway. Unless the heart rate wasn't mine either. I stared at the data, trying to process what I was seeing. My phone had been recording someone else's heart rate, someone who walked my routes every Tuesday while I slept, someone close enough to my body that the phone's sensors picked up their vitals like they were my own. The implication was so disturbing that my mind kept sliding off it, refusing to fully engage. I looked at the bedroom door, still half open, the dark hallway beyond. The shadow had been out there. The shadow that my phone thought was me, and it had come back tonight, right before I'd gotten home. It could have been inches away from me while I searched the apartment, and I never would have known. I got up and closed the bedroom door, locked it, Then I pushed my dresser in front of it for good measure. It was almost dawn now. Gray light was starting to creep through the blinds. I sat on my bed with my back against the wall and my phone in my lap, watching the health app, waiting to see if anything else would happen. The step counter stayed at 0. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. Not knowing that something out there wore my patterns like a skin, and I had no idea what it wanted or when it would come back. I called my brother the next morning, told him I needed help with something weird that I couldn't explain over the phone, that I needed him to come over and look at some data. Marcus was used to me being dramatic about tech stuff. I'd called him in a panic over a virus warning that turned out to be an ad pop-up, so he probably expected something minor. But he agreed to come by after work, and I spent the next 8 hours pacing my apartment, replaying the footage, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the shadow. Marcus arrived around 6 p.m. with a pizza and a skeptical expression. I sat him down, showed him the health app data, walked him through every Tuesday for the past month. Then I showed him the laptop footage, the shadow in the hallway, the 2-second movement at exactly 2:47 a.m. He watched it 3 times without saying anything. "That's weird," he finally admitted. "The shadow thing, I can't explain. Could be a glitch, could be compression, but..." He trailed off, frowning at the screen. "The health data is weirder. If you were asleep, none of this should be recording. The step counter needs actual movement. The heart rate sensor needs proximity to skin." "So what does that mean?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Either something's spoofing your phone's sensors in a way that shouldn't be possible, or..." He didn't finish the sentence. "Or something's actually there," I said. Marcus didn't argue. That scared me more than anything. We spent the next few hours going through the phone's settings, checking for malware, looking for any sign that the device had been compromised. Nothing. The phone was clean. The data was real. And neither of us had an explanation that made any sense. "Next Tuesday," Marcus said as he was leaving. "I'll come over. We'll set up multiple cameras, better angles. If something's happening, we'll catch it." I nodded. 5 days. I just had to make it 5 more days. I barely slept that week, kept the lights on, kept the bedroom door barricaded, kept checking the health app like it might suddenly reveal answers. The step counter stayed at 0. The shadow didn't appear on any of my obsessive recordings. Whatever this thing was, it only moved on Tuesdays. Marcus showed up Tuesday evening with a duffel bag full of equipment. 3 cameras this time. 1 in the bedroom, 1 in the living room, 1 pointed at the front door. We positioned them to eliminate blind spots, tested every angle, made sure the recordings were backed up to cloud storage in case something happened to the local files. "If you're sleepwalking, we'll catch it," Marcus said. "If something else is going on..." He didn't need to finish. We ordered food and settled in for the wait. Marcus took the couch. I sat in the armchair facing the hallway. We kept all the lights on, both of us watching the apartment like something might materialize at any moment. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. too. I was starting to drift, exhaustion finally winning out over adrenaline when Marcus grabbed my arm. "Tyler." His voice was strange, tight. "Your phone." I looked down at the health app, still open on my screen. The walk had started. 2:51 a.m. distance, 0.1 miles and climbing. But I was sitting right here. Marcus was looking right at me. Neither of us had moved. We both turned toward the hallway at the same time. The apartment was silent. Nothing visible, nothing moving. Just the empty corridor leading to my bedroom, every light blazing, no shadows that didn't belong. "Check the cameras," I whispered. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the app connected to the camera system. His face went pale. "Tyler, you need to see this." He turned the screen toward me. The bedroom camera showed my room, bed, dresser, window, everything normal. Except in the corner, near the closet, there was something, a shape, darker than the wall behind it, roughly human in outline, standing perfectly still. It wasn't there when I looked with my own eyes. The corner was empty, but on the camera, through the screen. It was undeniable. "It's in the apartment," Marcus said. "It's been here the whole time." The shape on the camera moved. Not fast, not sudden, just a slow turn, like it was looking toward the lens, toward us, watching through the camera. The outline seemed to solidify as I stared at it, becoming more defined, more human, more like. "Is that—" Marcus couldn't finish. It looked like me. Not perfectly, not a mirror image, but close enough. The same height, the same build, the same posture. A version of me made of shadow, standing in my bedroom, watching us through a camera feed. On my phone, the health app showed the walk continuing. 0.8 miles now. But the shape on the camera wasn't walking. It was just standing there, staring, while somewhere else, on some other plane, some other version of that route. Something wearing my patterns was taking its Tuesday walk. I stood up without thinking. "Tyler, don't..." But I was already moving. Down the hallway, toward the bedroom, toward the corner where the camera showed something that my eyes refused to see. I had to know. I had to understand what this thing was, why it looked like me, why it had been walking my routes in the middle of the night for weeks. I reached the bedroom door, pushed it open. The corner was empty. Just wall, just carpet, just the faint smell of dust from the closet I never cleaned. But my phone vibrated in my hand, and I looked down. The health app had updated. The walk was complete. 2.8 miles, same as always, and there was a new notification I'd never seen before. Route saved. Share with Tyler? I stared at the words, share with Tyler, like I was a contact. Like whatever had been taking these walks wanted to send me the data, wanted me to have the route, wanted me to follow it. I tapped the notification before I could stop myself. A map appeared. Not the usual route. Not the Park Loop. Not Caldwell Street. This was somewhere else. A path I didn't recognize, leading out of the city into the industrial district near the river. It ended at a specific address, a building I'd never been to. Below the map, a timestamp. Next Tuesday, 2:47 a.m. An invitation. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind me. "What happened? What did you see?" I showed him the map, the address, the timestamp. He looked at me with something close to fear in his eyes. "You're not actually thinking about going there?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know what I was thinking. I just knew that something had been learning me for weeks, walking my routes, wearing my data like a disguise, and now it wanted to show me where those walks were really leading. Whatever this thing was, it had been building up to something, and next Tuesday, I was going to find out what. Marcus tried to talk me out of it. Spent the rest of that night and most of the following week texting me articles about sleep disorders, carbon monoxide poisoning, shared delusions, anything that could explain what we'd seen without accepting what it implied. I understood why. Accepting it meant accepting that something impossible was real, and Marcus had always been the rational one in our family, the one who needed evidence, explanations, frameworks that fit the world as he understood it. But he'd seen the camera footage. He'd watched that shadow turn toward the lens. He knew, even if he couldn't admit it. I spent the week researching the address. It was a warehouse in the industrial district, abandoned for at least a decade according to property records. Used to be a cold storage facility for a grocery distribution company that went bankrupt in 2011. No deaths on record, no crimes, no history that would explain why something wanted me to go there. Just an empty building slowly rotting by the river. Tuesday came. I told Marcus I wasn't going. Told him I'd stay home, keep the cameras running, ignore the invitation, and hope whatever this was would eventually lose interest. I lied. At 2:30 a.m., I got in my car and drove to the address on the map. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe desperation, maybe some pull I couldn't name that had been building since I'd first seen that phantom walk in my health app. I needed to know. Even if knowing destroyed me, I needed to understand what had been wearing my patterns every Tuesday night. The warehouse was exactly as I'd expected. Dark windows, chain link fence, loading docks with doors rusted shut. I parked across the street and sat there for a long moment, watching, waiting for some sign that I wasn't alone. At exactly 2:47, my phone buzzed. The health app opened on its own. A walk had started, but not for me. A second dot appeared on the map, blue like mine, moving toward the warehouse from the opposite direction. I watched it approach, watched it enter the parking lot, watched it stop maybe 50 feet from where I was sitting. I got out of the car. The lot was empty, broken asphalt, weeds pushing through cracks, a shopping cart lying on its side near the fence. No one there, nothing visible. But my phone showed the other dot, right in front of me. "I know you're there," I said. My voice sounded strange in the silence. Thin, afraid. The step counter on my app ticked up. 1 step, 2. The dot moved closer. I felt it before I saw it. That prickle at the back of my neck, that sense of being watched, of something standing just outside the range of my vision. The air got heavier, colder, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the span of a breath. And then I saw myself, not in a mirror, not a reflection. Standing maybe 20 feet away, at the edge of the parking lot, was a figure that looked exactly like me. Same height, same build, same clothes I was wearing right now. It didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite make out in the darkness. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in the car and drive until I hit daylight. But I couldn't move. Couldn't look away from this thing that had stolen my patterns, my roots, my data. This shadow that had been learning me for weeks. "What do you want?" I asked. It tilted its head. The movement was almost human, but not quite. Too smooth, too precise, like a video playing at the wrong frame rate. Then it spoke. My voice. My exact voice, down to the slight rasp I got when I was tired. "To finish." It took a step toward me, then another. The health app on my phone showed both dots converging, the distance between us shrinking with each passing second. I ran, back to the car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the keys in the ignition. The engine turned over and I floored it, tires screaming on the broken pavement. I didn't look in the rearview mirror, didn't want to see if it was following. Just drove, fast and reckless, until the warehouse was far behind me and the first gray light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. I never saw it again. The Tuesday walks stopped after that night. No more phantom routes in my health app. No more shadows on the camera footage. No more heart rate data from walks I didn't take. Whatever had been learning me, mimicking me, wearing my patterns like a second skin, it was gone, or finished, like it said. I don't know what that means. Don't know what it was building toward, what finishing required, what would have happened if I'd let that thing reach me in the parking lot. I've read theories online, stories about doppelgangers, about entities that need to learn a person completely before they can replace them, about digital ghosts that form in the spaces between data points. None of it feels quite right. None of it explains what I experienced. Marcus and I don't talk about it. We tried once, a few weeks after that night, and the conversation just died. There weren't words for what we'd seen, weren't frameworks that could contain it. So we let it go, filed it away in the part of our brains where impossible things live, and went back to our normal lives. Mostly normal anyway. I deleted the health app, turned off location services, disabled the step counter, removed every piece of tracking software from my phone. I know it probably doesn't matter. Whatever had access to that data doesn't need the app to find me if it wants to, but it makes me feel better. Like I'm not broadcasting myself into the void anymore, not leaving a trail of patterns for something to follow. I moved apartments too. Different building, different neighborhood, different route to work. I vary my schedule now, never do the same thing at the same time 2 days in a row. It's exhausting, living like this. But I can't shake the feeling that something out there knows me better than I know myself, and the only defense I have is to keep changing. Keep moving, keep being unpredictable. Some nights I still wake up at 2:47 a.m., just snap awake like an alarm went off, heart pounding, certain that something is wrong. I check my phone immediately, every time. Step counter at 0. Location services off. No phantom walks, no mysterious routes. But last week, I noticed something. My sleep data, the one tracking feature I forgot to disable, showed elevated heart rate activity. Tuesday night, 2:51 to 3:34 a.m. I wasn't walking. I was in bed, I'm sure of it. But something was keeping pace with my heartbeat. Something was still there, still tracking, still learning. And I have no idea what it's waiting to finish. Story 3. The man standing alone in the road. The first time I saw him, I almost killed us both. It was a little after 1 a.m., and I was driving home from my parents' place in Millbrook, a 3-hour stretch of back roads I'd taken to avoid the construction on the interstate. I'd made the drive dozens of times before, knew every curve and straightaway, every little town that blinked past in a smear of closed storefronts and sleeping houses. The route was boring, but boring was fine. Boring meant I could zone out, let the white lines hypnotize me, think about nothing while the miles disappeared under my tires. The night was cold and clear, that sharp November air that makes the stars look closer than they should. No moon, but enough starlight to see the outline of fields stretching out on either side of the road. Corn stubble mostly, already harvested, waiting for the first snow. I had the heat cranked and some podcast playing through my speakers. 2 women discussing a murder case from the 1970s in voices designed to sound casual about terrible things. I came around a bend doing maybe 55, and he was just there, standing in the middle of the road, dead center, straddling the yellow line, facing my direction. A man, tall, wearing dark clothes, arms at his sides, not waving, not moving, not doing anything except standing there like he'd been waiting for me specifically. I slammed the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked and my phone flew off the passenger seat. The car fishtailed, tires screaming against the asphalt, and for one horrible second I was sure I was going to hit him. The headlights washed over his figure, and I saw his face, pale, expressionless, eyes that didn't flinch as 2 tons of metal came skidding toward him. Then I was past. The car shuddered to a stop maybe 30 feet beyond where he'd been standing, angled across both lanes, engine still running. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too fast, louder than the podcast hosts, still chattering about blood spatter patterns. I looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. No man, no figure, nothing but asphalt and darkness stretching back toward the bend I'd just come around. I twisted in my seat to look through the rear window, thinking maybe the angle was wrong. Maybe he'd stepped off the road. Maybe he was lying in the ditch because I'd clipped him without realizing. Nothing, just empty road, empty fields, empty night. I sat there for a long moment, trying to slow my heart rate, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Fatigue hallucinations were a thing, right? I'd been driving for almost 2 hours. It was late. I'd been half listening to true crime content that probably wasn't helping my mental state. My brain had conjured a figure out of shadows and exhaustion, and I'd panicked over nothing. That's what I told myself as I straightened the car and started driving again. That's what I repeated like a mantra as the miles ticked by. You imagined it, you were tired. There was no one there. The explanation felt thin, but it was better than the alternative. 20 minutes later, I saw him again. Same stretch of empty road, same fields on either side, same darkness pressing against my headlights. He was standing on the shoulder this time, just off the pavement, facing the road like he was waiting to cross. I was going slower now, paranoid, watching the edges of my vision for any movement, so I had time to really look at him as I approached. He was real, no question about it. I could see the texture of his jacket, the shape of his shoes, the way his breath fogged slightly in the cold air. A real person, standing on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere at 1:30 in the morning. I didn't stop. Some instinct told me not to, some voice in the back of my head that sounded like my mother warning me about strangers. I slowed down as I passed, trying to get a better look at his face, but he turned away at the last second, a deliberate movement, like he didn't want to be seen. I watched him in my rearview mirror as I pulled away. He stood there motionless, getting smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed him entirely. My phone had landed in the footwell on the passenger side. I fished it out at the next straight stretch, one eye on the road, and thought about calling someone. My roommate, maybe. Or 911 to report a pedestrian on a rural highway in the middle of the night. But what would I say? There's a man standing by the road? That wasn't illegal. That wasn't even unusual, really. People broke down, people walked, people did all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. Except this didn't feel like any of those things. This felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate, a wrongness that had settled into my chest and wouldn't let go. I kept driving. The podcast had moved on to discussing witness testimony, but I wasn't listening anymore. Every shadow at the edge of my headlights made me tense. Every dark shape in the fields made my hands tighten on the wheel. I was maybe 45 minutes from home, and I'd never wanted to be anywhere more in my life. The third time I saw him, he was closer. Standing at the edge of the road again, but this time on my side, close enough that I could have reached out my window and touched him if I'd wanted to. I didn't slow down. I actually sped up, pressing the accelerator harder than I should have on these winding roads, and as I flew past, I made the mistake of looking at his face. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a reassuring smile. Something else. Something that pulled at the corners of his mouth in a way that didn't look quite right, that suggested too many teeth or not enough humanity behind the expression. I was going 70 now, way too fast, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from this stretch of road, away from whoever this man was, away from that smile that was still burned into my vision every time I blinked. I checked the mirror again. He was standing in the middle of the road behind me, same spot where I'd almost hit him the first time, same posture, same stillness, except that was impossible. I'd just passed him on the shoulder. He couldn't have gotten to the center of the road that fast, couldn't have moved at all in the second it took me to look away and back. But there he was, shrinking in the distance as I drove, watching me go. I didn't slow down until I hit the next town. Carver Falls was barely a town. One traffic light, a gas station, a diner that closed at 9 p.m., a handful of houses clustered around a church with a white steeple. But it had lights. It had buildings. It had the suggestion of other people, even if they were all asleep behind drawn curtains. And that was enough to make me pull into the gas station parking lot and sit there with my engine running, trying to get my breathing under control. I called my roommate Jess. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep, and I told her what happened. All of it. The man in the road, the 3 sightings, the impossible movement from shoulder to center in the space of a glance. I was talking too fast, I knew, sounding manic, but I couldn't slow down. The words came pouring out, like if I stopped, I'd have to think about what they meant. Jess listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Where are you now?" she asked. "Carver Falls, that little town about 45 minutes out." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." I told her she didn't have to, that I could finish the drive, that I was probably just tired and freaking out over nothing. She wasn't having it. "You're not driving the rest of the way alone," she said, and her voice had that tone she got when arguing was pointless. "Get some coffee, lock your doors, and wait for me." I did what she said. Went inside the gas station, bought a large coffee I didn't want, came back out and sat in my car with the doors locked and the interior light on. The parking lot was empty except for one pickup truck near the pumps, probably belonging to whoever was working the overnight shift inside. I sipped the coffee and watched the road, waiting for Jess, waiting for dawn, waiting for anything that wasn't the memory of that smile. An hour passed. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess saying she was 20 minutes out. I was starting to relax, starting to convince myself that whatever I'd seen was behind me now, when I glanced at the edge of the parking lot and felt my stomach drop. He was there. standing just beyond the reach of the gas station lights, right where the pavement met the gravel shoulder of the road. Same dark clothes, same still posture, same sense that he was waiting specifically for me, that he'd known exactly where I'd stop and had positioned himself accordingly. I didn't scream, wanted to, but my throat had closed up, and all that came out was a thin whimper that fogged the inside of my windshield. I fumbled for my phone, tried to call Jess, but my hands were shaking so badly I dropped it in the cup holder and had to dig it out with fingers that wouldn't cooperate. When I looked up again, he was closer. Not at the edge of the lot anymore, halfway across it, maybe 40 feet from my car. I hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't noticed any motion in my peripheral vision. He'd just jumped forward, like a video skipping frames, like reality had glitched and deposited him closer without bothering to animate the space between. I started the car, didn't think about Jess, didn't think about waiting, didn't think about anything except getting away. I threw it into reverse, backed out of the parking spot too fast, and almost clipped the gas pump before I got the car pointed toward the exit. My headlights swept across the lot as I turned. He was standing directly in front of my car. I slammed the brakes for the second time that night, the car lurching to a stop maybe 5 feet from where he stood. The headlights illuminated him fully now, no shadows to hide behind, and I could see every detail with horrible clarity. The jacket was old, some kind of work coat, stained and faded. His face was pale and gaunt, cheekbones sharp enough to cut, dark hair plastered to his forehead like it was wet. And his eyes were wrong. Not the color or the shape, but something behind them, an emptiness that made me feel like I was looking at a photograph of a person rather than the person themselves. He smiled again, that same smile from the road. Then he stepped aside, just moved out of the path of my car, casual as anything, like he was being polite, like he was letting me go. I gunned it. Tore out of that parking lot so fast my tires squealed against the pavement, and I didn't look back. Didn't check the mirrors, didn't glance at the shoulder of the road, just kept my eyes forward and drove until I met Jess's headlights coming the other direction. We pulled over on a wide shoulder, and I got out of my car and into hers without saying a word. She took one look at my face and didn't ask questions, just turned around and headed back toward home. I left my car sitting on the side of the road, didn't care. I'd come back for it tomorrow, in daylight, with other people around. "What happened?" Jess finally asked, when we were a few miles down the road. I told her about the gas station, the man appearing at the edge of the lot, then halfway across, then directly in front of my car. The way he'd moved without moving, skipped across space like distance was a suggestion rather than a rule. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "We should call the police." "And tell them what? There's a creepy guy standing around? They'll think I'm insane." "Someone needs to know, Em. What if he does this to someone else?" I didn't have an answer for that. Part of me wanted to believe it was just me, that I'd somehow attracted this man's attention and he'd lose interest now that I was gone. But another part, the part that had seen that smile, that emptiness behind his eyes, knew better. Whatever this was, it wasn't personal. It was something else. Something that had been waiting on that road long before I came along. We drove in silence for a while. The night pressed against the windows, and I found myself watching the shoulders of the road, searching for a tall figure in dark clothes. Every shadow made me flinch. Every tree that broke the line of the fields looked like a person standing still. "There," Jess said suddenly, and my heart stopped. "What? Where?" She pointed at a road sign we were passing. Carver Falls town limits. "We just passed it. We're out of the area now." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, but I couldn't shake the feeling that out of the area didn't mean anything, that whatever I'd seen tonight wasn't bound by town limits or county lines or any of the arbitrary boundaries humans drew on maps. It had let me go. That's what kept echoing in my head as Jess drove us home. At the gas station, when it had stepped aside, when it had smiled and moved out of my path, it had made a choice. It could have stayed in front of my car, could have made me wait, made me get out, made me face whatever it was up close. But it didn't. It let me leave, which meant it wasn't done with me. It was just not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Sat on the couch with every light in the apartment blazing, jumping at every sound, checking the windows every few minutes like something might be standing outside. Jess stayed up with me until around 4 a.m., then crashed on the other end of the couch, her presence a small comfort even if she couldn't do anything to help. Dawn came eventually. Gray light crept through the blinds, and with it came a thin sense of safety. Daylight meant normal. Daylight meant I could convince myself that last night had been an anomaly, a strange encounter on a lonely road that was over now. People saw weird things at night. It didn't mean anything. Jess drove me back to get my car around noon. The shoulder where I'd left it was empty. The car had been towed, probably by the county, and I spent 2 hours tracking it down and paying impound fees I couldn't afford. The whole time I kept looking over my shoulder, kept expecting to see a tall figure in dark clothes standing just at the edge of my vision. I didn't see him. Not that day, not that night, not for almost a week. I started to relax, started to file the experience away in the category of things that happened once and never again, like a car accident or a freak storm. I went to work, came home, watched TV with Jess, went about my life. The memory of that smile faded to a dull unease that only surfaced when I drove at night, and I handled that by simply not driving at night. Easy enough. Problem solved. Then I saw him at the grocery store. It was a Saturday afternoon, broad daylight, the parking lot crowded with families and shopping carts. I was loading bags into my trunk, not thinking about anything in particular, when I glanced across the lot and saw him standing between 2 parked cars about 50 feet away. Same clothes, same posture, same absolute stillness. I froze with a bag of groceries in my hands, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't a dark road in the middle of nowhere. This was a Kroger parking lot in the middle of the suburbs on a sunny Saturday. There were people everywhere, a mom wrestling a toddler into a car seat, an elderly man returning his cart, teenagers laughing near the entrance, normal people doing normal things, and none of them seemed to see him. A woman walked right past the spot where he was standing, close enough to brush his shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even glance in his direction. It was like he wasn't there for her, like he only existed for me. I dropped the groceries, didn't care that a jar of something shattered on the pavement. I got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there with my hands on the wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. When I looked at the spot between the parked cars, he was gone. I drove home too fast, ran up the stairs to my apartment, and locked myself inside. Jess was at work. I was alone with my fear and the growing certainty that this wasn't over, that it was never going to be over, that whatever I'd seen on that road had followed me home and was going to keep following me until what? I didn't know. Didn't want to find out. I started researching that night. Carver Falls, the road I'd been on, anything I could find about strange sightings or unexplained encounters in that area. Most of what I found was useless. Tourist information, real estate listings, a Wikipedia article about the town's founding in 1847. But buried deep in a local history forum, I found a thread that made my blood run cold. It was from 2019, posted by someone with a username I didn't recognize. They described an experience almost identical to mine, driving through the area late at night, seeing a man standing in the road, having him appear multiple times along the route. The post was long, detailed, and ended abruptly with, "I don't know what it wants. I see it everywhere now. If anyone has information, please contact me." There were no replies. The account had been inactive since that post. I kept digging, found 2 more accounts, scattered across different forums and years. A Reddit post from 2015 about a figure that follows you on rural Route 9, the road I'd been on. A comment in a paranormal discussion group from 2011 describing a man who moves without walking and smiles like he knows something you don't. Each account was fragmentary, incomplete. Each one ended without resolution, the poster disappearing into silence. I was reading through these accounts at my kitchen table when I looked up and saw him standing outside my window. Third-floor apartment, no balcony, no fire escape on that side of the building, just a sheer drop to the alley below. And there he was, on the other side of the glass, standing on nothing, his pale face inches from the window. I screamed, actually screamed, loud enough that I heard the neighbor's dog start barking through the wall. I scrambled backward, knocking my chair over, putting as much distance between me and the window as I could. He didn't move, just stood there, suspended 3 stories up, watching me through the glass. That smile was back. Wider now, or maybe I was just closer, could see more of it. His lips were cracked and bloodless, pulled back to reveal teeth that looked too white, too even, too much like something trying to imitate a human smile without understanding what it meant. Then he raised one hand and pressed it flat against the window. I watched his palm leave condensation on the glass, proof that he was real, that he had substance, that this wasn't a hallucination or a trick of the light. He was outside my window, 3 floors up, pressing his hand against the barrier between us like he was testing it, seeing how much it could take. The glass cracked. Just a small crack, a hairline fracture spreading from where his palm touched the surface. But it was enough. I ran. Out of the kitchen, through the living room, out the front door, and down the stairs. I didn't stop until I was outside, on the sidewalk, surrounded by street lights and passing cars and the blessed presence of other people. I looked up at my window from the street below. Empty. No figure, no face, no hand pressed against the glass. Just my apartment, lights on, curtains open, looking exactly like it always did. But I knew what I'd seen, knew what had cracked my window, and I knew, with a certainty that settled into my bones like ice water, that walls and doors and locks weren't going to keep this thing out. It was getting bolder, getting closer, testing the boundaries between us, seeing what it could push through, and I had no idea how to stop it. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. Called Jess from the sidewalk, voice shaking, and told her I couldn't explain, but I needed to stay somewhere else. She was at her boyfriend Derek's place across town, and she told me to come over, no questions asked. I drove there with my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, checking every mirror, every shadow, every pedestrian on every corner. I didn't see him. Not on the drive, not when I pulled into Derek's driveway, not when I stumbled inside and collapsed on their couch. For the first time since the grocery store, I felt something like safety. Different neighborhood, different building, different everything. Maybe distance mattered. Maybe I'd finally put enough space between us. I should have known better. Jess and Derek let me crash without pushing too hard for details. I gave them the broad strokes. Someone was stalking me. I didn't feel safe at home. I just needed a night or 2 to figure things out. They nodded along, concerned but not panicked. Normal reactions to a normal problem. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I fell asleep on the couch around midnight, exhaustion finally winning out over fear. Dreamless, heavy sleep, the kind your body forces on you when you've been running on adrenaline for too long. I don't know how long I was out before something woke me. A sound, faint, rhythmic, like someone tapping on glass. I opened my eyes and the living room was dark. The TV was off, the lights were off, even the power strip with its little green indicators had gone dark. I sat up slowly, heart already pounding, and tried to orient myself in the unfamiliar space. Tap, 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 coming from the front window, slow and deliberate, like someone knocking on a door, except it wasn't the door. It was the window, and Derek's place was a ground floor unit. I knew what I would see before I looked, knew it with the same bone-deep certainty that had been building since that first night on the road. But I looked anyway, because not looking was somehow worse. He was standing on the front lawn, maybe 20 feet from the window, clearly visible in the glow of a distant streetlight. His arm was raised, and as I watched, his hand moved, a slow, beckoning gesture. "Come here. Come outside. Come to me." The tapping continued, but he wasn't close enough to be making it. The sound was coming from the window itself, from the glass, like something invisible was rapping against it from the outside. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't run, couldn't do anything except sit there on the couch and watch him watching me. The tapping got louder, faster. The window started to vibrate in its frame, and I saw a crack forming in the lower corner, spreading upward like a slowly growing spider web. Then the lights came on. Derek was standing in the hallway in his boxers, hand on the switch, squinting at me with sleepy confusion. "Em, you okay? I heard something." I pointed at the window. "He's out there. He's right there, look." Derek looked, frowned, walked over to the window and peered out into the darkness. "There's nobody there," he said. I stumbled off the couch and went to see for myself. The lawn was empty. No figure, no man, no one standing in the streetlight's glow. But the crack in the window was still there. I pointed at it, my finger trembling. That wasn't there before. He did that. He was right there. I saw him. He was... Derek and Jess exchanged a look. The kind of look people give each other when someone they care about is clearly losing their mind. Jess came over and put her arm around me, led me back to the couch, spoke in soft, careful tones about stress and sleep deprivation and maybe seeing a doctor tomorrow. I let her talk, didn't argue. What was the point? They couldn't see him. Nobody could see him except me. Whatever this thing was, it had attached itself to me specifically, and there was nothing anyone else could do to help. I lay awake the rest of the night, watching the window, waiting for the tapping to start again. It didn't, but I knew he was still out there, waiting, patient, playing a game I didn't understand with rules I couldn't figure out. The next morning, I made a decision. If this thing had started on that road, maybe the road held answers. Maybe there was something there, a history, a location, a reason that could tell me what I was dealing with and how to make it stop. I told Jess I was going to my parents' place for a few days. She offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. I didn't tell her I was planning to drive the same route, to go back to the stretch of highway where I'd first seen him. She would have tried to stop me. I left around noon, taking the interstate this time, joining the back road only when I was a few miles from where it had all started. Daylight, bright sun, other cars on the road, all the things that were supposed to make me safe. He was standing at the first curve, exactly where I'd almost hit him that night. Middle of the road, straddling the yellow line, facing my direction. I slowed down as I approached, my hands steady on the wheel despite the fear clawing at my chest. This time I stopped. I don't know why. Some impulse I couldn't explain, some sense that running wasn't working and maybe confrontation was the only option left. I put the car in park, left the engine running, and opened my door. The air was cold, despite the sunshine. Silent, too. No birds, no wind, no distant hum of traffic. Just me and him and the empty road stretching out in both directions. "What do you want?" I called out. He didn't answer, just stood there, that smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I know others have seen you," I continued, stepping closer, despite every instinct screaming at me to get back in the car. "I found their posts online. They all disappeared. Is that what happens? You follow people until they disappear?" Nothing. No response. No movement. Just that empty stare. Those wrong eyes. That smile that knew things I didn't. I was maybe 10 feet away now, close enough to see the texture of his skin, the individual strands of his wet-looking hair, close enough to smell something faint and wrong, like damp earth and old leaves and something else underneath that I didn't want to identify. "Why me?" I asked. My voice cracked on the second word. "I didn't do anything. I don't know you. Why are you following me?" He moved, not toward me, just a slight tilt of his head, that curious gesture I'd seen dogs make when they're trying to understand something. And then he spoke for the first time. His voice was like static, like a radio caught between stations, words forming in the white noise. "You stopped." That was all. 2 words, crackling and distant, barely recognizable as speech. "What?" "The first night. You stopped." His head tilted the other direction. "Most people keep driving. You stopped, looked for me, wanted to know if you'd hit me." I remembered. The way I'd twisted in my seat, checked the rearview mirror, searched for a body in the ditch. I'd been worried about him, worried I'd hurt someone. "You cared," he said. That smile widened. I'd been waiting so long for someone who cared. He took a step toward me. I ran. I don't remember getting back to my car. Don't remember starting the engine or pulling away or any of the mechanical actions that must have happened between that moment and the next clear memory I have, which is driving 90 miles an hour down the interstate with tears streaming down my face and my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I didn't stop until I reached a rest area 40 miles away. Pulled into a parking spot, killed the engine, and sat there for what felt like hours, just breathing. Just trying to process what he'd said and what it meant. You stopped. You cared. I'd always thought of compassion as a good thing. Something to be proud of. Something that made me a decent person in a world full of people who looked the other way. But out there on that road, my compassion had been a trap. A signal. A beacon that said, here's someone who will notice. Someone who will look back. Someone who won't just keep driving. The others who'd posted online, the ones who'd disappeared, had they stopped too? Had they gotten out of their cars, searched the ditches, worried about a stranger they thought they'd hurt? Had that moment of kindness been the thing that marked them, that made them visible to whatever this thing was? I thought about the way he'd smiled when he said it, like he'd been starving for years and I'd finally brought him something to eat. I drove to my parents' house, not the scenic route, not the back roads, straight shot on the highway, surrounded by other cars, other people, the safety of numbers. My mom opened the door and took one look at my face and pulled me inside without asking questions. I spent the next 3 days in my childhood bedroom, curtains drawn, barely eating, jumping at every sound. He didn't appear. Not at my parents' house, not on the drive back to my apartment, not in the weeks that followed. The cracked window in my kitchen was still there when I returned, proof that it had happened, that I hadn't imagined it. But he wasn't waiting outside, wasn't standing in parking lots or on sidewalks or at the foot of my bed when I woke up in the middle of the night. For a while, I let myself believe it was over, that going back to the road had been some kind of closure, that hearing him speak had broken whatever connection existed between us. Maybe he'd gotten what he wanted. Acknowledgement, attention, proof that someone cared, and now he'd move on to waiting for the next person compassionate enough to stop. I tried to return to normal life, went back to work, hung out with Jess, forced myself to drive at night again, even though every shadow at the edge of my headlights made my heart stutter. Weeks turned into months. The memory faded from a fresh wound to a dull scar, something I carried but didn't think about constantly. Then I found the forum post. I'd been checking periodically, searching for updates from the accounts I'd found during my initial research. Most of them stayed silent, abandoned profiles on dead websites. But one day, about 8 months after my encounter, a new post appeared in the paranormal discussion group. It was from a woman in Ohio, 300 miles from Carver Falls. She described seeing a man on a rural road late at night, standing in her lane, appearing multiple times along her route. She'd almost hit him, she said, and she'd stopped to check if he was okay. The comments were sparse, a few people suggesting she'd imagined it, a few others sharing vaguely similar stories. But at the bottom, posted just hours before I found it, was a reply from the original woman. He came to my window last night, 3rd floor. He smiled at me. I don't know what to do. I created an account and sent her a private message. Told her I'd experienced the same thing, that I understood what she was going through, that I had information that might help. I refreshed the page every few hours, waiting for a response. 3 days later, her account was deleted. The post was gone. No trace that she'd ever existed except for my message, sitting unread in an inbox that no longer existed. I think about her sometimes, wonder if she's okay, if she found a way out, if the thing that follows stopped cars found her the way it found me. I hope she made it. I hope she's out there somewhere, looking over her shoulder but still breathing, still fighting. But part of me knows better. I don't drive that road anymore. Don't go anywhere near Carver Falls or Route 9 or any of the little towns that dot that stretch of rural nothing between here and my parents' place. I take the interstate now, always, even when it adds an hour to the trip. I stay in well-lit areas. I keep my car doors locked at all times. And if I ever see someone standing on the side of the road, no matter how lost or hurt they look, I don't stop. I can't stop. That's what he wants. That's how he finds you. Through the part of you that cares about strangers, that worries about people you've never met, that can't just drive past someone who might need help. He's weaponized compassion itself, turned kindness into a door he can walk through. I hate what that's done to me. Hate the person I've become. The one who looks away, who keeps driving, who pretends not to see. Last month, I passed a woman with a flat tire on the highway shoulder, and I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Just gripped the wheel and stared straight ahead and told myself someone else would help her, someone who hadn't seen what I'd seen. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe that makes me just as bad as all the people I used to judge for not getting involved. But I'm still here, still alive, still able to tell this story, to warn people about what's waiting on those dark roads for anyone foolish enough to care. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I think about what he said. I've been waiting so long for someone who cared. How long is long? Decades? Centuries? How many people have stopped on that road over the years, gotten out of their cars to check on a stranger, and never been seen again? And I think about the ones who didn't stop. The ones who drove past without a second glance, who made it home safe, who never knew how close they came. Are they the lucky ones? Or did they just fail a test they didn't know they were taking? I used to believe the world rewarded goodness, that kindness came back to you, that compassion made you stronger, that caring about others was always the right choice. Now I know better. Now I know there are things out there that feed on goodness, that use your best qualities against you, that wait in the dark for someone decent enough to stop and ask if they're okay. I still see him sometimes, not often, maybe once every few months, but enough to know he hasn't forgotten me. A figure at the edge of a crowd, a shape in my rearview mirror that disappears when I blink, a man standing alone at the far end of a parking lot, watching, waiting, smiling that horrible smile. He let me go that day on the road. I still don't know why. Maybe I wasn't what he wanted after all. Maybe he was just playing with me, seeing how far I'd run before I broke. Or maybe he's still waiting, still patient, still standing in the middle of that road at 1 a.m., hoping I'll come back, hoping the part of me that cared will win out over the part that learned to look away. I won't go back. I tell myself that every day. I won't go back. I won't stop. I won't be the person I used to be. But some nights, when the guilt gets heavy, and I remember the woman with the flat tire, the woman in Ohio, all the people I've driven past without helping, some nights I wonder if not caring is its own kind of death. If he's already won, just by making me afraid to be kind. That's the worst part, I think. Not the fear, not the sleepless nights or the constant vigilance or the way I flinch at shadows. The worst part is what he took from me. The person I was before I stopped on that road. The one who believed that kindness was worth the risk. I don't know if I'll ever get her back. The supervisor who vanished from the building. I liked Mr. Hendricks. That's important to say up front, because everything that came after might make it seem like I didn't, like I was looking for reasons to distrust him, to find something wrong. But the truth is, in the 8 months I worked under his supervision, he was one of the best bosses I'd ever had. He was quiet. That was the first thing you noticed about him. This tall, thin man in his 50s who moved through the office like he was trying not to disturb the air. He never raised his voice, never micromanaged, never made you feel stupid when you asked a question. He'd just nod, consider your words carefully, and give you an answer that actually helped. In a building full of corporate climbers and middle managers with something to prove, Mr. Hendricks was a relief. An island of calm in a sea of passive-aggressive emails and unnecessary meetings. I was 26 that year, fresh out of a dead-end retail job, grateful to have landed a position at Caro and Associates, even if it meant working the late shift in the records department. The building was one of those glass and steel towers downtown, 14 floors of insurance paperwork and actuarial tables and whatever else kept the lights on. My job was simple: digitize old files, organize databases, make sure decades of paper records made it safely into the 21st century. Tedious work, but steady. The kind of thing you could do with half your brain while the other half planned what to make for dinner. The late shift ran from 4 p.m. to midnight, which meant I spent most of my time in a half-empty building. The day staff cleared out around 5 or 6. The cleaning crew came through around 9, and by 10 o'clock it was usually just me, a handful of other night owls, and Mr. Hendricks. He always stayed late. I'd see his office light on when I arrived and still glowing when I left, this warm yellow rectangle at the end of the hall that became a kind of comfort, a sign that someone else was there, that I wasn't completely alone in this maze of cubicles and filing cabinets. We talked sometimes during my breaks. Nothing deep, just small talk about the weather, about traffic, about the vending machine that kept eating quarters without dispensing anything. He mentioned a wife once, in passing, and a house in the suburbs he was renovating on weekends. Normal things, boring things, the kind of details that make a person feel real and solid and trustworthy. That's why I noticed when he started acting strange. It was a Thursday in late October, about 2 weeks before he disappeared. I was coming back from the bathroom and passed his office on the way to my desk. The door was open a crack, unusual because he usually kept it closed, and I heard him talking. Nothing weird about that, except his tone was off, low and urgent, almost pleading, like he was trying to convince someone of something they didn't want to hear. I slowed down without really meaning to, caught a few words through the gap. Can't keep doing this. They're going to notice. Please, just give me more time. Then silence. I stood there for a moment, feeling like an eavesdropper, and was about to keep walking when the door swung open and Mr. Hendricks was standing right there, looking at me. His face was pale, sheened with sweat, and his eyes had this wild quality I'd never seen before, like a cornered animal. "Nina," he said, just my name, nothing else. "Sorry," I stammered. I was just walking by. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a phone call, family stuff, you know how it is." I nodded like I understood, even though his desk phone had been in its cradle and I hadn't seen a cell phone in his hand. He closed the door gently, and I went back to my desk feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't explain. Over the next 2 weeks, the strangeness escalated. Mr. Hendricks started staying even later than usual, sometimes still in his office when I left at midnight. His light would be on, door closed, no sound from inside. The cleaning crew mentioned that he'd asked them to skip his office, said he'd take care of it himself. His appearance changed, too. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual wearing down. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes slightly rumpled, that careful quietness becoming something more like exhaustion. I asked him once if everything was okay. He looked at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Fear, maybe, or relief, like he'd been waiting for someone to notice. "I'm fine, Nina," he said, Just a lot on my plate right now. It'll sort itself out. It didn't sort itself out. The last time I saw Mr. Hendricks was a Tuesday night, November 8th. I remember the date because I'd brought in cupcakes for a co-worker's birthday, and I'd left one on his desk as a gesture of goodwill. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, his favorite based on the one time I'd seen him eat a piece of cake at an office party. I knocked, heard him say, "Come in," and found him sitting at his desk staring at his computer screen with an expression I still can't fully describe. Blank, but not empty. More like someone watching something they'd seen 100 times before, something they couldn't look away from even though they wanted to. "Brought you something," I said, setting the cupcake on his desk. He looked at it, looked at me, and for a second his face softened into something almost like gratitude. "Thank you, Nina. That's very kind." I smiled, told him not to work too late, and went back to my desk. At midnight, when I clocked out, his office light was still on. I waved at the closed door out of habit and headed home. The next morning, Mr. Hendricks was gone. Not fired, not transferred, not on leave. Gone. His office was empty, not cleared out, but empty in a different way, like it had never been occupied at all. No computer on the desk, no family photos, no stack of files he was always working through. Just blank walls and bare furniture and that yellow lamp sitting in the corner, unplugged. I asked around, asked HR, asked the other supervisors, asked anyone who might know what had happened. The answers I got didn't make sense. "Who?" they said. "I'm sorry, I don't know anyone by that name." Every single one of them. Like Mr. Hendricks had never existed at all. I thought I was losing my mind. That was the only explanation that made sense. Some kind of breakdown, a stress-induced hallucination that had conjured an entire person out of nothing. I'd invented a supervisor, imagined 8 months of conversations, fabricated a man who'd never been real. Except I had proof. The cupcake. I'd left it on his desk the night before he disappeared, and when I went back to his office, his empty, stripped-bare office, it was still there. Sitting on the corner of the desk, chocolate with vanilla frosting, slightly stale but definitely real. I picked it up with shaking hands and felt something loosen in my chest. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined him. Mr. Hendricks had been here, had sat at this desk, had existed. So why didn't anyone remember? I started digging, quietly at first, not wanting to draw attention, not wanting to be the weird girl in records who kept asking about someone nobody had heard of. I checked the employee directory. His name wasn't there. Checked the organizational chart posted in the break room. His position was listed, but the name next to it was blank, like someone had whited it out. I went down to HR and asked to see the staff records for my department, made up some excuse about needing to verify a signature on an old file. The woman behind the desk was helpful, pulled up the database, showed me the list of supervisors going back 10 years. No Hendricks. No one in that role at all for the past 18 months, according to the records. "That can't be right," I said. "Someone's been supervising the late shift. I've been reporting to someone." She shrugged, checked again. The records were clear. The late shift supervisor position had been vacant since the previous person retired. I'd been working without oversight, apparently, unsupervised for 8 months. I left HR feeling like the floor had tilted beneath me. The hallway seemed longer than it should be, the fluorescent lights humming at a frequency that made my teeth ache. I passed a security guard on my way back to my desk and stopped. "Hey," I said. "Do you have logs? Like badge records of everyone who enters and exits the building?" He looked at me like I'd asked him to explain quantum physics. "Yeah, of course. Why?" "Can you check something for me? A name, Hendricks. I need to know if he badged in over the past few months." The guard was nice about it. Probably thought I was trying to catch a cheating boyfriend or something. He pulled up the system, typed in the name, and frowned at the screen. "Nothing," he said. "No one by that name in our system." "That's impossible. He worked here, 14th floor, records department. He was here every night." The guard gave me a look, Not unkind, but concerned. The kind of look you give someone who might be having an episode. I don't know what to tell you. Systems got no record of anyone named Hendricks. You sure you've got the right building? I was sure. I was absolutely sure. But I thanked him and walked away because what else could I do? That night, I stayed late. Later than usual, later than I should have. The cleaning crew came and went. The other night shift workers trickled out one by one, and by 11 o'clock, I was alone on the 14th floor. I told myself I was looking for evidence, but really I think I was hoping he'd come back, that his office door would open, and he'd walk out, rumpled and tired, and everything would make sense again. I went back to his office around 11:30. The door was unlocked, the room dark. I turned on the yellow lamp. Still there, still unplugged, but I plugged it in, and it cast that familiar warm glow across the empty space. I sat in his chair, behind his bare desk, and tried to think. That's when I noticed the drawer. It was the bottom drawer, the deep one on the right side of the desk where people usually keep personal items. I hadn't thought to check it before, had assumed the office had been thoroughly emptied. But when I pulled the handle, it stuck for a second, before sliding open with a reluctant groan. Inside was a notebook, not a company notebook, not some official document, a cheap spiral-bound thing, the kind you'd buy at a drugstore, filled with handwriting I recognized instantly. Mr. Hendricks had sat across from me in meetings, had signed off on my work orders, had written notes in a cramped, careful script that was impossible to mistake. I pulled it out and started reading. The entries were dated, going back about 3 months. The early ones were mundane. Meeting notes, reminders, a grocery list tucked between pages. But as I flipped forward, the tone changed. The handwriting got shakier, the entries more frantic. October 3rd. They're watching again. Can feel it in the walls. Tried to leave early, but the elevator wouldn't come. Took the stairs. Doors wouldn't open until I went back to my desk. October 10th. Found a door on the 12th floor that wasn't there yesterday. Didn't open it. Didn't want to know. October 17th. Someone else saw me today. New girl in records, Nina. She looked right at me. First person in weeks who seems to know I'm here. I stopped reading. My hands were trembling. The entry was dated 3 weeks before I'd started noticing his strange behavior, which meant he'd been dealing with this, whatever this was, for much longer than I'd realized. I kept going. October 25th. They spoke to me last night, through the vents. Said I'd been chosen, that I should be grateful. I'm not grateful. I'm terrified. I think I'm becoming part of the building. November 1st. Can't remember my wife's face. Looked at my driver's license and didn't recognize the photo. It's happening faster now. November 7th. Nina brought me a cupcake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. I almost cried. It's been so long since someone was kind to me. I hope she doesn't notice. I hope they don't notice her noticing. The final entry was dated November 8th, the night he disappeared. They're coming. I can hear them in the floors, in the ceiling, in the space between walls. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if there's anything left of me to save. If someone finds this, Nina, maybe if she comes looking, don't stay. Don't work late. Don't let them see you. The building is hungry and I've already been eaten. I closed the notebook. The office was silent around me, that deep middle-of-the-night silence that feels heavier than it should. The yellow lamp flickered once, twice, and somewhere far away, below me maybe, or inside the walls, I heard something move, something that sounded like footsteps, going up. I shoved the notebook into my bag and stood up so fast the chair rolled backward and hit the wall. The footsteps were getting louder, closer, climbing through the building like something moving up a throat. I couldn't tell where they were coming from. The stairwell, maybe, or somewhere inside the walls themselves. The elevator. I needed to get to the elevator. I ran out of the office and down the hall, my footsteps echoing too loud in the empty space. The fluorescent lights flickered as I passed under them, one by one, like something was following me through the electrical system. The elevator bank was at the far end of the floor, past rows of empty cubicles and dark conference rooms, and I'd never realized how long that hallway was until I was sprinting down it at 11:45 at night with something climbing up from below. I hit the call button, once, twice, 3 times, jamming my finger against the plastic until it hurt. The display showed the elevator on the ground floor. It wasn't moving. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, come on, come on." The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I stood there with my hand pressed against the elevator button, not breathing, listening for any sound that would tell me where it was, where they were. Mr. Hendricks had written about them in his notebook. They're watching, they spoke to me, they're coming, but he'd never described what they actually were. Behind me, a door opened. I spun around. The hallway stretched out empty, all the doors closed. Nothing visible in the half-light of the emergency exits. But I'd heard it, a distinct click, the sound of a latch releasing, somewhere in the maze of offices and conference rooms I'd just passed. Then another door opened, closer this time, and another, a cascade of clicks moving toward me like something was checking each room, searching, getting closer with each one. The elevator dinged. I threw myself inside before the doors were fully open, slammed the button for the lobby, and pressed myself against the back wall as the doors slid shut. Through the narrowing gap, I saw something move at the far end of the hallway, a shape, tall and thin and wrong somehow, proportions that didn't quite match what a person should look like. Then the doors closed, and the elevator started to descend, and I was alone in a metal box dropping through the guts of a building that wanted to eat me. The ride down took too long, way too long. The elevator should have reached the lobby in under a minute, but I watched the floor numbers tick down, 14, 13, 12, and they seemed to be moving slower than physics allowed. Like the building was stretching itself, adding distance between me and the exit. At the 8th floor, the elevator stopped. I hadn't pressed 8. Nobody had called it. But the car shuddered to a halt. The doors slid open, and I found myself staring at a hallway that shouldn't have existed. The 8th floor was supposed to be accounting. I'd been there once, during my orientation tour. Rows of desks, motivational posters, a break room with an espresso machine that nobody knew how to use. This wasn't that. This was something else. A corridor that stretched into darkness, lined with doors that had no numbers, lit by a single bulb that swung gently from a chain even though there was no wind. And at the far end, barely visible in the shadows, something was standing. I hit the close door button. Hit it again and again, but the doors didn't move. They just stayed open, framing that impossible hallway, giving me a perfect view of the figure at the end as it started walking toward me. I couldn't see its face, didn't want to see its face, but the way it moved was familiar. That careful, quiet gait, like someone trying not to disturb the air, like someone who'd spent years learning how to go unnoticed. Mr. Hendricks? The name came out before I could stop it. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and when it spoke, the voice was his, distant and distorted, like a recording played through broken speakers, but unmistakably his. "Nina, you should have gone home. What happened to you? What is this place? I told you, the building is hungry." The figure took another step forward, and I could see more of it now. The shape of his suit, the slope of his shoulders, the place where his face should have been but wasn't quite right, like someone had tried to draw him from memory and gotten the proportions wrong. I tried to warn you, in the notebook. I hoped you wouldn't find it. I hoped you'd just forget me like everyone else. Everyone forgot because the building made them forget, right? It erases people, erases that they ever existed. The building takes what it needs. Another step. He was halfway down the corridor now, still wrapped in shadow, still wrong. It needed me. It needed my time, my years, myself. And now there's nothing left except what it chooses to remember. The elevator doors finally started to close, slowly, reluctantly, like they didn't want to cut off the view. I pressed myself into the corner and watched the gap narrow. "Run, Nina." His voice was fainter now, almost lost in the hum of the machinery. "Don't stay late. Don't let them see you. And whatever you do, don't..." The doors closed. The elevator dropped. I didn't hear the end of his sentence. Didn't know what warning he was trying to give me. The car plummeted past floors 7, 6, 5, and I gripped the handrail and prayed that the lobby would be normal, that the exit would be where it was supposed to be, that the building would let me go. The doors opened on the ground floor, marble floors, security desk, the revolving door leading out to the street. Normal, safe, real. I ran. Didn't badge out, didn't grab my coat from my locker, didn't do anything except sprint for the exit and burst through the door into the cold November night. I stood on the sidewalk, gasping, staring up at the tower of glass and steel that had been my workplace for 8 months. The 14th floor was dark. Every floor was dark, actually. The whole building sitting there silent and lightless, like it had shut itself down for the night. Like it was sleeping, or pretending to sleep. I walked 6 blocks before I called a cab. Didn't trust myself to drive. Didn't trust the parking garage beneath the building. Didn't trust anything that was connected to Caro and Associates. When I finally got home, I locked every door, closed every curtain, and sat on my bedroom floor with the notebook in my hands, reading Mr. Hendrix's final entries over and over until the words stopped making sense. The building is hungry, and I've already been eaten. I'd thought that was a metaphor. Now I wasn't sure it was. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. Lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, reading the notebook, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen was a stress hallucination or a waking nightmare or anything other than what it appeared to be. The rational explanations felt thin, almost insulting, but I clung to them anyway. The alternative was accepting that buildings could be alive, could be hungry, could consume people so completely that even the memory of them disappeared. On the 3rd day, HR called. Not to check on me, not to ask how I was feeling or when I'd be back. The woman on the phone, different from the one I'd spoken to before, had a clipped, efficient tone that left no room for pleasantries. "We noticed some irregularities with your badge records," she said. "You were in the building after hours last Tuesday, 14th floor, records department. You stayed until nearly midnight." My throat went dry. Yes. I was finishing a project. "You accessed an office that isn't assigned to any current employee. Spent approximately 45 minutes inside. We need you to come in and explain." I was just, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., don't be late." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the phone in my hand, a cold weight settling in my stomach. They knew. The building knew I'd found the notebook, that I'd read Mr. Hendrix's warnings, that I'd seen the thing he'd become, and now it was calling me back. I thought about running, just packing a bag and disappearing, driving until I hit a coast and starting over somewhere new. But I had a lease, bills, a life I couldn't just abandon. And part of me, the stupid, stubborn part that had gotten me into this mess, wanted answers. Wanted to understand what had happened to Mr. Hendrix and why nobody remembered him. Wanted to know if there were others, if this had happened before, if there was any way to stop it. So the next morning, I went back to Caro and Associates. The building looked different in daylight, normal. Just another glass tower among dozens of glass towers, full of people in business, casual heading to jobs they probably didn't love. I badged in at the security desk and the guard smiled at me, no sign of recognition or concern, just the blank politeness of someone who processed hundreds of faces a day. HR was on the 6th floor. I took the elevator, watched the numbers tick up, held my breath when it passed 8, and stepped out into a perfectly ordinary reception area. Carpet, chairs, a water cooler, a woman at a desk who told me to wait and someone would be with me shortly. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20, At the 30-minute mark, I started to notice things. The clock on the wall had stopped at 9:17. The receptionist hadn't moved, hadn't typed, hadn't answered the phone, hadn't even blinked as far as I could tell. The other people in the waiting area were frozen too, mid-motion, like someone had pressed pause on reality. I stood up. Hello? Nothing. No response, no movement, no acknowledgement that I'd spoken. Just the silence and the stopped clock, and the terrible growing certainty that I was alone in a way I hadn't been alone before. The receptionist's head turned. Slowly, too slowly, the motion mechanical and wrong. Her eyes found mine, and when she smiled, her teeth were too white and too many. "They'll see you now," she said. A door opened behind her. Not the door to the HR offices, a different door, one that hadn't been there a moment ago. Beyond it was darkness, complete and absolute, and from somewhere inside I heard a sound like breathing, like the building itself was inhaling, waiting, preparing to swallow. "No," I said. The receptionist's smile widened. "It's not a request." I ran, back toward the elevator, back toward the stairs, back toward anything that might lead to an exit. But the floor had changed while I wasn't looking. The hallway I'd come from was gone, replaced by a corridor that stretched impossibly long, lined with doors that had no handles. The elevator bank had vanished. The stairs were nowhere to be found. I was inside the building now, really inside it. Not just a visitor, not just an employee, but something else. Something the building had decided to keep. Nina. His voice, Mr. Hendrick's voice, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun around, searching for the source, and found him standing at the end of the impossible corridor. Clearer than he'd been in the elevator. More solid. More real. He looked almost like himself again. Tired, rumpled, that quiet kindness still visible beneath the exhaustion. "You came back," he said. "I told you not to come back." They called me. HR. They said there were irregularities with my badge. There is no HR. There hasn't been an HR department in this building for 15 years. He walked toward me, and I noticed he wasn't quite touching the floor, hovering just above it, like gravity was a suggestion he'd stopped following. The building creates what it needs to bring people in. Fake departments, fake meetings, fake emergencies, whatever it takes to get you through the door. Then how do I get out? He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the details of his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair. Close enough to see the sadness there, the resignation. "You don't," he said. "Not once it's decided to keep you. I tried for months. Found exits that led to more hallways, stairs that went up forever, doors that opened onto walls. The building is bigger on the inside than the outside. It goes down further than any foundation. And it's old, Nina. Older than the company, older than the city, older than anything that has a right to exist." "So, that's it?" My voice cracked. "I just stay here forever? Become whatever you've become?" "Maybe. Maybe not." He glanced over his shoulder toward something I couldn't see. "You're different. You noticed me when no one else could. You looked for me when everyone else forgot. That means something. That means the building hasn't fully claimed you yet." "What do I do?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. A key. Old-fashioned, brass. The kind that belonged to a lock from another century. "There's a door," he said. "Sub-basement, past the boiler room, behind a wall that looks solid but isn't. I found it years ago, but I was already too far gone to use it. You might still have a chance." I took the key. It was warm in my palm, almost alive. "What's behind the door?" "I don't know. I never opened it. But it's the only thing in this building that the building doesn't control. The only thing it's afraid of." He smiled, just a little, and for a moment. He looked exactly like the man who'd supervised me for 8 months, the quiet one who never raised his voice, who always had time for questions, who'd almost cried over a cupcake because someone had been kind to him. Go, before it realizes what I'm doing. What about you? I'm already gone, Nina. I've been gone for a long time, but maybe... He paused, something flickering in his eyes. Maybe if you make it out, you could remember me. That would be enough, just knowing that someone remembers. The corridor behind him was starting to shift, walls moving, floor tilting, the building waking up to what was happening. I wanted to say something. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'll remember you, I promise. But there wasn't time. I turned and ran toward the darkness, the key clutched in my hand, and behind me I heard Mr. Hendricks whisper one last thing. The stairs at the end of the hall. Don't stop, no matter what you see. Then the walls closed in, and he was gone. I found the stairs where he said they'd be, a door that materialized in the shifting walls, already open, leading down into a darkness so complete it felt solid. I didn't hesitate, threw myself through and started descending, one hand on the railing and the other clutching the key so tight the teeth bit into my palm. Don't stop, no matter what you see. I saw plenty. The stairwell changed as I went down, concrete becoming stone, becoming something older, rougher, slick with moisture that smelled like rot. Things moved in the darkness below me, shapes that pressed against the edges of my vision and retreated when I looked directly at them. Voices whispered from the walls. Some of them called my name. Some of them begged for help. One of them sounded like my mother, asking why I never visited anymore. I didn't stop. The stairs seemed endless. Down and down and down, past landings that led to doors I didn't open, past floors that couldn't exist this far beneath the earth. My legs burned, my lungs ached. But I kept moving, kept descending, because somewhere above me I could hear the building waking up, rearranging itself, hunting for the thing that had slipped through its fingers. The boiler room appeared without warning. One moment I was on the stairs, the next I was standing in a vast space filled with ancient machinery, pipes and valves and tanks that looked more like organs than equipment, pulsing with a rhythm that might have been steam and might have been something else. The air was thick and hot, hard to breathe, and the darkness pressed in from all sides like something physical. The wall that looks solid but isn't. I searched, ran my hands along brick and metal, looking for the gap, the seam, the hidden passage Mr. Hendricks had promised. The building groaned around me, a sound like bones settling, and I knew I was running out of time. Whatever patience it had was ending. Whatever game it had been playing was over. My fingers found an edge, a crack in the brick, barely visible, wide enough to fit my hand through. I pushed, and the wall swung inward on hinges that hadn't been used in decades. Beyond it was a corridor, short, narrow, ending in a single door. The door was old, wooden, iron-banded, the kind of thing you'd find in a castle or a church, and set into its center was a lock, old-fashioned, brass, waiting for the key that was already in my hand. Behind me, something entered the boiler room. I didn't turn around, didn't want to see what the building had sent after me, what shape it had chosen to wear. I just moved, crossing the corridor in 3 steps, jamming the key into the lock, turning it with hands that shook so badly I almost dropped it. The lock clicked. The door swung open. And on the other side was daylight. I stumbled through and found myself standing on a sidewalk. Not the sidewalk outside Caro and Associates, a different street, a different part of the city entirely. Behind me was a brick wall, windowless and solid, no sign of the door I'd just come through. I spun around, pressed my hands against the bricks, but there was nothing. Just a wall, just an ordinary, impossible wall that had somehow led me out. I sank to my knees on the concrete and cried. That was 6 months ago. I never went back to Caro and Associates. Called the next day and quit over the phone, didn't even ask about my final paycheck. The woman who answered sounded confused, said she didn't have any record of a Nina Chen in their system, said I must be thinking of a different company. I hung up without arguing. The building had erased me too. Not completely, not the way it had erased Mr. Hendricks, but enough. Enough that I didn't exist in their records, their badge logs, their memory. I'd escaped, but I'd left a piece of myself behind. A version of Nina that worked the late shift in records, that noticed things she shouldn't have noticed, that went looking when everyone else forgot. I have a new job now, different building, different company, nothing taller than 3 floors. I work days only. I never stay late. And when the elevator takes too long or a hallway seems to stretch further than it should, I leave. I don't care if people think I'm strange. I know what's out there. I know what certain buildings can become when they've been standing long enough, when they've swallowed enough people, when they've learned to hunger. I still have the notebook. Keep it in a lockbox in my closet, wrapped in cloth like something precious. Sometimes I take it out and read through the entries, trace Mr. Hendricks' handwriting with my finger, remind myself that he was real, that he existed, that he was kind and patient, and so afraid at the end, and nobody remembers him except me. That's what I promised him, that I would remember. I looked him up after I got out, searched every database I could access, every public record, every archive. There was no Leonard Hendricks in any of them. No birth certificate, no driver's license, no social security number. It was like he'd never been born at all. The building hadn't just consumed him. It had reached backward through time and erased every trace, every proof that he'd ever walked the earth. Except the notebook, except his words, except the memory of a man who stayed late every night, who kept his door open, who almost cried when someone brought him a cupcake. I think about him a lot. Wonder if any part of him is still in there, still aware, still trapped in those impossible hallways and endless stairs. Wonder if he knows I made it out. Wonder if it brings him any peace, knowing that someone escaped, that someone remembers, that the building didn't win completely. I hope it does. I hope, wherever he is, whatever he's become, some small part of Leonard Hendricks knows that he mattered, that his warning saved my life, that his final act of kindness meant something. The Caro and Associates building is still there. I've seen it from a distance, that glass and steel tower rising against the skyline, full of people who have no idea what lives beneath their feet. They go to work. They sit at their desks. They take the elevator up and down and never think twice about it. Most of them will be fine. Most of them will work their shifts and go home and live their ordinary lives. But some of them will stay late. Some of them will notice things they shouldn't. Some of them will catch a glimpse of a figure at the end of a hallway, a door that wasn't there yesterday, a stairwell that goes down further than the basement should allow. And maybe, if they're lucky, they'll find a notebook hidden in a desk drawer. A warning from someone who came before. A map to the one door the building can't control. I think about leaving a message, going back somehow and hiding something for the next person who notices too much. But I'm not brave enough. Not yet. The thought of stepping into that lobby, of feeling the building recognize me, of having those walls start to shift and breathe around me again. I can't do it, not even to save someone else. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe Mr. Hendricks would understand. All I can do is tell this story. Put it out there. Hope it reaches someone who needs to hear it. If you work in a building that feels too big, too old, too aware of your presence, trust that feeling. If you notice someone who nobody else seems to see, who stays late every night, who looks tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep, pay attention. Be kind. Bring them a cupcake. You might be the last person who ever sees them, the last person who remembers they were real. And if you ever find yourself trapped in a place that shouldn't exist, looking for a way out that doesn't seem to come, look for the door. The old one, the hidden one, the one the building doesn't want you to find. It's there. It's always there. You just have to be brave enough to look. Story 5. The Voice, whispering behind my curtain. The first time I heard it, I thought I'd left my phone playing a video. I was 16, home alone for the weekend, while my dad worked a double shift at the plant 3 towns over. This was normal for us. He'd been pulling extra hours since Mom left, trying to keep up with the mortgage on a house that felt too big for 2 people and way too big for 1. I didn't mind. I was old enough to take care of myself, and honestly, I liked the quiet. Liked being able to stay up late, eat cereal for dinner, fall asleep with my headphones in and no one telling me to get some rest. My bedroom was at the back of the house, 2nd floor, with a window that looked out over the backyard and the woods beyond. We lived on the edge of town, that kind of semi-rural area where the houses are spread far apart and your nearest neighbor is a 5-minute walk through overgrown fields. The window had these thick blackout curtains my mom had installed years ago because I was a light sleeper and the sunrise used to wake me at 5 a.m. every summer. Dark blue, heavy fabric, the kind that pooled on the floor because she'd bought them too long and never gotten around to hemming them. That night, Friday, early March, still cold enough that I could see my breath if I stood outside. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard the voice. At first, it was just a murmur, low, rhythmic, almost musical. I pulled out my earbuds and listened, trying to figure out where it was coming from. My first thought was the phone itself, that maybe I'd accidentally opened a video in another tab. I checked. Nothing playing. My second thought was the TV downstairs, but I'd turned it off an hour ago. Third thought, a neighbor, maybe, or someone outside. But we didn't have neighbors close enough to hear. And the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from behind the curtain. I sat up in bed, my heart doing a weird little skip. The curtain hung motionless, that heavy blue fabric blocking out the darkness beyond the window. The voice continued, quiet, almost too quiet to make out, but definitely there. Words, I thought. Someone was saying words, stringing them together in sentences I couldn't quite understand. Hello? My voice came out thin, uncertain. The whispering stopped. I waited, barely breathing, staring at the curtain like it might move. 10 seconds passed. 20. The house was silent around me. That deep late-night silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I told myself I'd imagined it. Told myself it was the wind, or pipes, or some auditory hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Then the whispering started again. This time I caught a word. Just one, rising out of the murmur, like a bubble breaking the surface. My name. Owen. I was out of bed before I made the conscious decision to move. Backed up until I hit my closet door, eyes locked on the curtain, every instinct screaming at me to run. But run where? This was my house. My room. Whatever was behind that curtain was between me and the only window, and the only other exit was the bedroom door, which meant turning my back on whatever was making that sound. I made myself breathe. Made myself think. The window was closed. I was sure of it. I always kept it closed at night, especially in March when the temperature dropped below freezing. Nothing could get in through a closed window. Nothing could be behind that curtain except glass and the darkness outside. I crossed the room in 3 quick steps and yanked the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the window, frost creeping up the corners, the backyard a black void beyond. No face pressed against the glass, no figure standing in the yard. Just night and cold, and my own terrified reflection staring back at me. I stood there for a long time, one hand still gripping the curtain, waiting for something to happen. It didn't. The voice was gone. The room was silent. Eventually, feeling stupid and shaky, I let the curtain fall back into place and returned to my bed. I didn't sleep that night. Lay there with the lights on and my phone in my hand, flinching at every creak of the old house, waiting for the whispering to return. It didn't. By the time the sun came up, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Almost. The second night, I tried to prepare. Left my bedroom door open so I could hear the rest of the house. Kept a flashlight on my nightstand. Told myself that if I heard anything, I'd record it on my phone, get proof, or prove to myself that the sound had a normal explanation. I didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, Right as I was starting to drift off, the whispering began again. Same low murmur, same rhythmic quality, same location. Behind the curtain, like someone was standing just outside my window and speaking through the glass. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and hit record. The voice got clearer. Still quiet, still hard to understand, but clearer than before. I caught fragments this time. Owen. And then something else. Something that sounded like, "Let me," or "Help me," or maybe both, the words slurring together in a way that didn't quite sound human. I played back the recording the next morning. Static, that's all it was. 37 seconds of faint static. No voice, no words, nothing but the ambient hiss of an empty room. I played it 3 times, turned the volume all the way up, pressed the speaker against my ear. If there was a voice in that recording, I couldn't find it, but I'd heard it. I knew I'd heard it, clear as anything, whispering my name through the window in the middle of the night. My dad came home Sunday evening, exhausted and distracted, and I thought about telling him. Sat at the kitchen table while he heated up leftover pizza and tried to figure out how to say, "I think there's something outside my window that whispers to me at night." In the end, I didn't say anything. He had enough to worry about. And besides, what could he do? Put up a different curtain? Tell me I was imagining things? I went to bed that night, half hoping the voice would return, just so I'd know I wasn't crazy. Half hoping it wouldn't, because the alternative was worse. It came back at 2 a.m., clearer than ever. "Owen, open the window, I'm so cold." I didn't open the window. Lay there rigid under my blankets, eyes squeezed shut, hands clamped over my ears like a child hiding from a thunderstorm. The voice kept going, pleading, insistent, repeating the same words over and over until they blurred together into a kind of chant. "So cold, Owen. Please, just open the window. Just let me in." Eventually, it stopped. I don't know when exactly. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the next thing I remember is waking up to gray morning light and the distant sound of my dad making coffee downstairs. My hands were still pressed against my ears, my neck stiff from the awkward position, my whole body aching like I'd been tensed for hours. I told myself it was a dream, sat through breakfast with my dad, nodded along while he talked about his shift, went to school and did homework and ate dinner and did all the normal things a normal person does. But underneath it all was this current of dread I couldn't shake, this low-level hum of fear that got louder every time the sun started to set. That night, I slept in the living room, told my dad I'd fallen asleep watching TV, which he accepted without question because he was too tired to push. The couch wasn't comfortable, but it was away from the window, away from the curtain, away from whatever was waiting in the dark outside my room. The voice found me anyway. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of whispering coming from the sliding glass door that led to the back patio. Same voice, same rhythm, same words, almost. "Owen, I'm so cold. Please, let me in." Except now there was something else underneath. A note of frustration, maybe. Impatience. I grabbed a blanket and spent the rest of the night in my dad's truck, parked in the driveway with the doors locked and the engine running for heat. When he found me there the next morning, I told him I'd had a nightmare and needed some air. He looked at me for a long moment, something worried flickering behind his eyes, but he didn't push. He never pushed. That was the problem with my dad. He loved me. I knew he did. But he didn't know how to talk about anything that wasn't concrete. Schedules and bills and what was for dinner. Not voices in the night. Not fear that lived in your chest like a second heartbeat. I started researching. Spent my lunch periods at school in the library, searching for anything that might explain what I was experiencing. Auditory hallucinations, sleep disorders, carbon monoxide poisoning, infrasound from wind passing over certain structures. I read about all of it, grasping at explanations like a drowning person reaching for driftwood. Some of it almost fit. Hypnagogic hallucinations. sounds you hear on the edge of sleep that aren't really there. Seemed possible, except the voice was too clear, too specific, too aware of where I was in the house. I found one article that mentioned something called the calling, a phenomenon reported in rural areas, particularly near woods, where people claimed to hear voices beckoning them outside at night. The article was from some paranormal blog I probably shouldn't have trusted, but the description matched what I was experiencing so closely, it made my skin crawl. The voice often uses the target's name, it said. It may claim to be cold, or lost, or in need of help. Under no circumstances should you respond or open any door or window. To acknowledge the voice is to invite it closer. I'd already acknowledged it. That first night, when I'd said hello into the darkness, when I'd crossed the room to pull back the curtain, had I invited it closer? Was that why it kept coming back? Why it had followed me to the living room? Why it seemed to know exactly where I was, no matter where I tried to hide? Thursday night, I tried something different. I stayed awake on purpose, sitting up in bed with every light on, waiting for the voice to come. I had my phone ready to record again, even though I knew it wouldn't capture anything. I had questions I wanted to ask, things I needed to understand. It came at 1:47 a.m., earlier than usual. "Owen, who are you?" I whispered. My voice was shaking, but I forced the words out. "What do you want?" A pause, longer than I expected. Then, "I want to come inside. I've been outside so long. I'm so tired of being cold." "Why me? Why my window?" Another pause. When the voice spoke again, it was different, closer somehow, like it had pressed itself against the glass. "Because you can hear me. No one else can hear me anymore. I've been calling for so long, and you're the first one who answered." Something about those words made my throat tight. Despite everything, despite the fear, despite the wrongness of the situation, I felt a flicker of something like pity. Whatever this thing was, it sounded so lonely, so desperate, like it really had been calling in the darkness for years, waiting for someone to acknowledge it existed. "I can't let you in," I said. "I don't know what you are." "I'm cold," the voice repeated. "I'm so cold, Owen. Please, just open the window a little. Just a crack, just enough to let some warmth out." I almost did it. My hand actually moved toward the window latch before I caught myself, before the rational part of my brain screamed loud enough to drown out that strange, sad voice. I pulled my hand back and shoved it under my blanket, sat on it like I couldn't trust it not to betray me. "No," I said. "I'm sorry, but no." Silence. A long, heavy silence that pressed against my eardrums. Then the voice spoke again, and this time there was no sadness in it, no loneliness, just something flat and cold that made every hair on my body stand up. "Then I'll wait. I'm very patient, Owen. I've been patient for a long time." The whispering stopped. I sat there until dawn, watching the curtain, waiting for it to move. It didn't, but I could feel something on the other side of that glass, something that had stopped pretending to be pathetic and was now just watching, waiting, patient, like it said. The next day, I made a decision. If no one could tell me what this thing was, maybe someone could tell me what had happened in this house, what had happened in those woods behind it, what might have died out there, alone and cold, calling for help that never came. I started digging into the history of our property. What I found made me wish I hadn't. The county records office was a 20-minute bus ride from my school. I went there Friday afternoon, told my dad I had a study group, and spent 3 hours in a basement room that smelled like old paper and dust, combining through property records and newspaper archives. Our house was built in 1987 by a family named Weaver. They lived there for 6 years before selling and moving out of state. After that, it changed hands every few years, never longer than 4 or 5, which struck me as strange for a family home in an area where most people stayed put for decades. I counted 7 different owners between the Weavers and my parents, who'd bought the place when I was 9. The records didn't explain the frequent turnover, No foreclosures, no legal disputes, no obvious red flags. Just family after family buying the house and then quietly leaving. I was about to give up when the archivist, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, asked if I needed help finding anything specific. Old news articles, I said. Anything about this address or the woods behind it? She typed something into her computer, frowned at the screen, and disappeared into a back room. When she came back, she was carrying a folder that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. There was an incident, she said, back in the 70s, before the house was built. Might be what you're looking for. The folder contained photocopies of 3 newspaper articles, brittle with age, the text faded but still readable. The headlines told the story in fragments. Local girl missing after school. Search continues for young student. Body found in wooded area. Her name was Eliza Crane. She was 11 years old, a 5th grader at the elementary school I'd attended before moving up to the high school across town. In November of 1973, she'd gotten off her school bus at the normal stop and started walking home through the fields and woods that would later become our neighborhood. She never arrived. They searched for her for 2 weeks. Volunteers combing through the underbrush, police dogs tracking scents that went nowhere, her parents on the evening news begging for any information. They found her body in early December, about a quarter mile into the woods behind where our house now stood. She'd fallen into a ravine, according to the coroner's report, a steep drop hidden by overgrown brush, easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. Her injuries suggested she'd survived the fall but couldn't climb out. The official cause of death was exposure. She'd frozen to death. Alone, in the dark, probably calling for help that never came. I sat in that basement room for a long time after I finished reading. The articles spread out in front of me, a cold weight settling in my chest. I thought about the voice at my window, the things it said. I'm so cold, Owen. I've been outside so long. Eliza Crane had been cold, too. Had been outside, in those woods, for weeks while her family searched and hoped and eventually gave up. Had she called out? Had she screamed until her voice gave out, then whispered, then gone silent? Had some part of her kept calling even after her body stopped? I photocopied the articles, thanked the archivist, and caught the bus home. The sun was setting by the time I got there, the sky that deep bruised purple that always made the woods behind our house look darker than they should. I stood in the backyard for a while, staring at the tree line, trying to see the spot where they'd found her. Nothing looked special, just trees and brush and shadows stretching toward the house as the light faded. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was staring back. That night, I tried talking to her. The whispering started around midnight, same as always. Owen, open the window. I'm so cold. I'd left the curtain open this time, wanted to see the glass, wanted to look at whatever was out there even if I couldn't actually see it. Eliza, I said, is that your name? Eliza Crane? The whispering stopped, a long pause, longer than any of the others, filled only by the sound of my own breathing. You found me. Her voice was different now, younger somehow, smaller. No one ever finds me. I know what happened to you. I know about the ravine, about the cold. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. It was dark. The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. I couldn't climb out. I kept calling, but no one heard me. I called, and then I couldn't feel anything anymore. And then I was still calling, but my mouth wasn't moving. And then I was here, at this window, and I've been here ever since. Something in my chest ached. This wasn't a monster. This was a kid. A scared, lonely kid who'd died horribly and gotten stuck somehow, trapped in an endless loop of cold and darkness and desperate calling. What do you need? I asked. How can I help you? Let me in. The voice was eager now, almost breathless. Let me inside where it's warm. I just want to feel warm again, Owen. I've been cold for so long, 50 years. 50 years of cold and dark, and no one hearing me until you. Please, Just open the window. Just let me come inside. I reached for the latch. I don't know why. Every instinct should have screamed at me to stop. But in that moment, all I could think about was an 11-year-old girl dying alone in a ravine, calling for help until her voice gave out, and then some. My fingers touched the metal, and Eliza's voice changed. "Yes," she hissed. "Yes, that's it. Open it. Let me in. Let me in." The hunger in those words hit me like a splash of cold water. This wasn't a scared child anymore. This was something else. Something that had been wearing that story like a costume, using my sympathy to get what it wanted. I jerked my hand back from the latch. No, you're not. That's not what this is. Open the window." The voice was loud now, louder than it had ever been, loud enough that I stumbled backward and nearly fell. The glass rattled in its frame. The curtain swayed even though there was no wind. "I've been patient. I've waited. You owe me this." "I don't owe you anything," you answered. The words were a snarl, a shriek, something that didn't sound human at all anymore. "You said my name. You invited me, and now you have to let me in. That's how it works. That's the rule." The window cracked. Not much, just a thin line running from the bottom corner toward the center, the glass splintering under pressure that came from outside, from the darkness, from whatever had been pretending to be Eliza Crane. I watched the crack spread, inch by inch, and I knew with horrible certainty that when the glass broke, it would get in. It would finally get in, and whatever happened next wouldn't be anything like a scared little girl finding warmth. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the curtain, that heavy blue fabric my mom had hung years ago, and I yanked it down. Rod and all, ripping it from the wall, the whole thing crashing to the floor in a heap. The window was exposed now, nothing but glass between me and the night. And pressed against that glass, barely visible in the darkness, was a face. Not a child's face. Something older. Something wrong. Features that shifted when I tried to focus on them. A smile that was too wide. Eyes that reflected nothing because there was nothing behind them to reflect. "I see you," it whispered, and the crack in the glass grew another inch. I ran. Down the hallway, down the stairs, not thinking about where I was going, just moving. Behind me I heard the glass shatter, a sharp, explosive sound that seemed way too loud for one window. And then something else. A rushing, like wind pouring through a gap that shouldn't exist. Like something flooding into the space I'd just left. My dad was asleep in his room at the front of the house. I burst through his door without knocking, without warning, and shook him awake with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Dad, we have to go. We have to leave right now." He came awake slowly, blinking at me with confused, sleep-fogged eyes. "Owen, what's wrong? What time is it?" "There's something in the house. It broke my window. Dad, please, we have to go." He sat up, finally registering the panic in my voice. I watched him shift from confused to concerned to something harder, more alert. He swung his legs out of bed and reached for the baseball bat he kept propped against his nightstand, a habit from when Mom first left and he'd been paranoid about break-ins. "Stay behind me," he said. We moved into the hallway together. The house was dark, the only light coming from the bathroom nightlight and the faint glow of street lamps through the front windows. Everything looked normal, silent, still. Then the whispering started. It came from everywhere now. Not just my room, not just behind the curtain, but from the walls themselves, from the ceiling, from the air around us. A chorus of voices layered over each other, all saying different things, all demanding attention. "Let me in. I'm so cold." You answered. "You owe me." "Owen. Owen. Owen." My dad froze. His face went pale in the dim light, and I realized this was the first time he was hearing it. The first time anyone besides me had heard it. "What the hell?" he breathed. "We have to go. Dad, please. We have to get out of the house." He didn't argue. Whatever skepticism he might have had, evaporated in the face of those voices, that impossible sound coming from inside the walls of our home. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairs, toward the front door, toward escape. We made it halfway down before the lights went out. All of them, every lamp, every nightlight, every glowing appliance in the kitchen. The darkness that followed was absolute, the kind of dark that makes you doubt your eyes are even open. I felt my dad's grip tighten on my arm, heard his breathing go sharp and fast. "Keep moving," he said. "Front door, straight ahead." We shuffled forward, one hand on the railing, feet finding each step by memory. The whispering had stopped, which was somehow worse. The silence felt like something holding its breath, waiting, watching us fumble through the dark. My dad's foot hit the bottom step. I heard him exhale with relief, heard him turn toward the door. Then I heard something else. A voice, not whispering this time, speaking clearly, calmly, from somewhere directly in front of us. "Owen's father. You can't take him. He's mine now." My dad raised the bat. I couldn't see it, but I heard the movement, the shift of air. "Who's there? I'll call the police. I swear to God." "God isn't here," the voice sounded amused. "God stopped listening to this place a long time ago, but I'm here. I've always been here." And Owen answered me. He said my name, he acknowledged me. That means he's mine. Like hell he is. My dad lunged forward. I heard the bat swing, heard it connect with something that made a sound like wet cloth, heard him grunt with surprise as the momentum carried him past whatever he'd hit. Then I heard him scream, "Dad!" I couldn't see what was happening. Could only hear, thrashing, struggling, my father making sounds I'd never heard him make, sounds of pain and fear that turned my blood to ice. I threw myself toward the noise, hands outstretched, and my fingers found fabric, his shirt. I grabbed it and pulled, yanked him backward with strength I didn't know I had. We fell together, hit the floor hard, and suddenly the lights came back on. The hallway was empty, just us, sprawled on the hardwood, my dad clutching his arm where 3 long scratches welled with blood. The front door was 10 feet away, closed, undisturbed. There was nothing between us and escape. "Go!" my dad gasped. "Owen, go, get to the car." I helped him up and we ran. Out the front door, across the porch, down the driveway to his truck. He fumbled the keys out of his pocket and we threw ourselves inside. And he started the engine and we were moving, backing out of the driveway, pulling onto the road, leaving that house behind. I looked back as we drove away. Every window in the house was dark except one, my bedroom. The broken window, glass scattered across the floor inside, curtain torn down, nothing but a black rectangle where the glass used to be. And standing in that window, visible just for a moment before the distance swallowed the details, was a figure, small, child-sized, waving. We drove to a motel 30 miles away and didn't stop until we got there. My dad's arm needed stitches. We told the ER it was a dog bite, and they didn't ask too many questions. We sat in that motel room until sunrise, neither of us sleeping, neither of us talking much. What was there to say? We'd both heard the voices. We'd both felt the thing in the dark. There was no explaining it away, no pretending it hadn't happened. Around 6 a.m., my dad finally spoke. "Your mother used to hear things," he said. "At night, after you were asleep. Whispers," she said, "coming from your room. I thought she was stressed, imagining things. That's part of why she left." I stared at him. "You never told me that." I didn't believe her. He looked down at his bandaged arm, at the scratches that definitely hadn't come from a dog. I should have believed her. I should have listened. We checked out of the motel that afternoon and drove to my grandmother's house 2 hours away. Dad called a realtor from the road and put the house on the market. We never went back, hired a company to pack our things, had everything shipped to storage, handled the sale entirely through paperwork and phone calls. The house sold in 3 months. A young couple, the realtor said. First-time buyers, excited about the space, charmed by the woods in the backyard. I thought about warning them. Thought about telling them what lived in those woods, what came to the windows at night, what happened if you were foolish enough to answer. I didn't. I was 16 and scared, and I just wanted to forget any of it had ever happened. But I've thought about that couple every day since. I'm 23 now, 7 years since that night, 7 years since I last set foot in that house, and I still can't sleep with my curtains closed. We stayed at my grandmother's for almost a year while Dad figured out what came next. He took a job in her town, something with fewer hours and less pay, but also less distance between us. We rented an apartment, then a small house, then eventually bought a place of our own, a new construction in a subdivision where everything was beige and identical and blessedly ordinary. No history, no woods, no windows that looked out on anything but other people's backyards and above-ground pools. Dad and I never talked about what happened, not directly. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with this expression, guilt and fear and something like awe, all tangled together. But he never brought it up, and neither did I. Some things are too big to fit into words. Some experiences sit between people like furniture, always there, always taking up space, but never acknowledged. I did talk to Mom, though, once. It was about 2 years after we left. I'd gotten her number from my grandmother, called her from a parking lot because I didn't want Dad to overhear. She answered on the second ring, and her voice sounded exactly like I remembered, warm but distant, like she was always thinking about something else. I told her what had happened, all of it. The whispering, Eliza Crane, the thing in the window, the night we ran. I told her what Dad had said about her hearing it too, about the voices from my room, about how she'd tried to tell him and he hadn't believed her. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. I could hear her breathing through the phone, uneven and shaky. "I thought I was losing my mind," she finally said. "I thought the stress of motherhood, the isolation out there, all the things they tell you can make a woman crazy. Your father looked at me like I was broken, and eventually I started to believe him. That's why I left. Not because I didn't love you, Owen, because I thought I was going to hurt you somehow. I thought my crazy was going to infect you." "It wasn't crazy," I said. "It was real. It was always real." "I know that now." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I left you there with it." We talked for another hour, cried mostly, made tentative plans to see each other, which we eventually followed through on. Awkward visits that slowly got less awkward, a relationship rebuilt from the wreckage of something neither of us had understood at the time. She's part of my life again now. Not the way she would have been, but something. Something is better than nothing. The couple who bought our house was named Patterson. I know because I looked them up about a year after the sale, morbid curiosity getting the better of me. Their names were on the property records, James and Michelle Patterson, newlyweds, first-time homeowners. The records showed they'd paid below market value, which made sense. The house had been sitting empty for months, and the realtor was probably eager to close. They lasted 8 months. I found the listing when it went back on the market. Same photos, same description, same cheerful language about peaceful country living and private wooded lot. No mention of why the previous owners had left so quickly. No mention of what might be waiting in the back bedroom when the sun went down. I thought about reaching out, tracking down Michelle Patterson or James or whoever I could find and asking them what they'd experienced. But part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid that if I confirmed it, if I heard someone else describe the whispering, the cold, the thing that wore a dead girl's story like a mask, it would make it more real somehow, more present. Like speaking about it too loudly might call its attention back to me. The house has sold 3 more times since the Pattersons. I check the records every few months, a habit I can't seem to break. The ownership periods get shorter each time. 2 years, then 14 months, then 8 months, then 6. The price keeps dropping. Eventually, I think, someone will buy it who doesn't leave. Someone who answers the voice at the window and doesn't stop themselves before opening the latch. Someone who lets it in. I wonder what happens then. Does it finally go quiet? Does the thing in the woods get what it wants and move on? Or does it just start calling for someone else, hungry in a way that can never be satisfied, patient in a way that never ends? I don't know. I don't want to know. What I do know is this. Some places are wrong. Not haunted exactly. That word feels too small, too simple for what I experienced. Just wrong. Broken in some fundamental way. A crack in the world where things can slip through that shouldn't exist at all. Eliza Crane was real. Her death was real. But the thing that used her story, that spoke with her voice, that pressed its face against my window and demanded to be let in, that wasn't her ghost. That was something older. Something that had probably been calling from those woods long before Eliza fell into that ravine, and would keep calling long after everyone who remembered her was gone. I still hear whispering sometimes. Not often, not like before, but occasionally, late at night, on the edge of sleep, when my defenses are down and my mind is drifting. A voice just at the threshold of hearing, murmuring words I can't quite make out. I tell myself it's auditory hallucinations, hypnagogic sounds, the normal static of a brain shutting down for the night. But I always check the window. Every time. Pull back the curtain, look at the glass, make sure nothing is standing on the other side. So far, there hasn't been. So far, I've been safe. I keep my windows locked anyway. Keep the curtains thin enough to see through, light enough that nothing can hide behind them. I live in a fourth-floor apartment in the middle of a city, surrounded by concrete and noise and the constant presence of other people. As far from those woods as I can get without leaving the country entirely. It's not enough. I know it's not enough. The thing at the window didn't need proximity. It needed acknowledgement. It needed someone to hear it, answer it, say its name. And I did all of those things. I invited it closer before I knew what I was doing, and some invitations can't be revoked. Maybe it forgot about me. Maybe there have been enough other people in that house, enough other voices answering its call, that I've faded from its memory. Maybe patience has limits even for things that have been waiting for decades. Or maybe it's still waiting, still watching, still calling my name in a voice I can almost hear, just below the threshold of perception, patient and cold and absolutely certain that someday I'll answer again. That's what keeps me up at night. Not the memory of what happened, but the fear of what might still be coming. The knowledge that I got away once, and the terrible suspicion that once might be all I get. If you ever hear something whispering at your window, something that knows your name, something that claims to be cold and alone and desperate for warmth, don't answer. Don't acknowledge it. Don't even look. Just close your eyes, cover your ears, and wait for morning. Some things are better left outside, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.